And for those who enjoy this channel and would love to support us financially, please feel free to hit that donate link. We'd greatly appreciate it. God bless.
It's all yours, SFT.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Okay, guys, we're live tonight. I'm really excited for this one. We've got Bill Morgan, who's been on here before, as well as Jordan, who's been here before as well. So this is going to be really exciting. They're both, very intelligent, really good debaters. So we know this one's going to be a debate, a discussion to remember. Today, we're debating creation versus evolution. Before I go over the format, though, and before we get into the openings, I want to pass it off to the debaters. We could start with Bill Morgan, just to go over a brief introduction as to who they are, what they're doing on their channels, things like that. So, Bill, the floor is all yours.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. Happy to be here. My life story is I was raised going to church. In high school, I became an atheist for about 12 years. I believed the theory of evolution was great science. And creation evidence led me back to belief in God. And I got a degree in engineering. I've worked as an engineer for 37 years, mechanical engineering. For the Navy, I'm so old, I used to work on battleships, and I've done design work on nuclear submarines and lots of other interesting things. I love engineering, and it's a pleasure to discuss with another engineer tonight.
That's awesome, Bill. Thanks so much for that. Yeah, I think we're going to change the title to Battle of the Engineers. So like I said, this is going to be a good one. And of course, thanks for giving us your time, guys, because without you guys agreeing to this debate, we wouldn't have a debate to have tonight. So let's pass it on to Jordan. Take your time.
Well, my name's Jordan. I also happen to be a mechanical and nuclear engineer. I used to be a young Earth creationist. My story is kind of the opposite of Bill's. I grew up as a young Earth creationist, and then evidence persuaded me to change my mind. So I'm currently what you might call an agnostic atheist. Importantly, just as important as what I am is what I'm not. I'm not a biologist, a geologist, a paleontologist, any other kind of scientist. So if you hear me say I don't know a lot, that's why. Definitely get your biology from biologists. And if you want to hear more from me or my buddy Jared, he's a theologian I do a podcast with. It's called Reason to Doubt, Reason the number 2. And it's just a podcast on skepticism and how to properly examine claims. I think we've got stuff for everybody.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that introduction there, Jordan. Once again, thanks for joining us tonight. We've also got Jason here, who is going to be the co-moderator of the night. So, Jason, thanks for doing that for us. If you wanted to say a couple words there, brother. Oh, I think you're on. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, he's muted.
I think you're muted there, Jason.
Okay. Yeah. No. Don't really want to say much. Just that this thing I'm puffing on is basically zero nicotine. So I don't want to be a bad influence to people that are watching.
Well, we appreciate that, Jason. So before we get started, I want to say to the audience, for the question and answer period, if you have any questions for the debaters, either Bill or Jordan, please tag either myself, Praise I Am That I Am, or Jason. We'll make sure we see those in the chat. We'll save them, and we'll do our best to ask those questions at the end of the debate. That being said, let's go over the format real quick. So we've got 12-minute openings. Actually, which one of the debaters is going to be starting? Okay, so awesome. So we'll have Bill start, followed by 8-minute rebuttals, a 40-minute discussion, 5-minute closings, and as I said earlier, a question and answer period. So that being said, why don't we get the party started? We can hand it over to Bill. Whenever you're ready, I'll start the clock, so I'm not going to start it on your first word or anything. Whenever you're ready, you have 12 minutes.
Share screen. Can you guys see that? Hello? Can you see that?
Let's see. Praise. Is the screen being shared?
No.
Let's see.
No, there's no screen being shared.
Okay. Sorry about that, guys. See? Share.
It's at the bottom, and you got to put audio with it if you have some audio with it.
I do not. Okay.
Oh, there we go.
All right. Let's see. All right. So, can you see?
Yes.
Okay. So everybody can see that, right?
Yes.
Okay. Here I go. Well, once again, it's a pleasure to. What? Pardon me.
I can see it. I can see it. It seems to be my computer's lagging behind. Sorry, just ignore me. Sorry.
Okay. Shall I start?
Yep.
Okay. Great. It's a pleasure to be here discussing this with Jordan, a fellow engineer. And I really, really like engineers. I've been an engineer for 37 years. I like how they think, and I love the work. It's an honor to be with you. I've debated a lot of college students and professors, but I like the way that engineers think. I look forward to this. Now, different careers can pay you for different results. Philosophers have important jobs, but their world is a world of ideas and thoughts and words. They really don't produce a workable product that can be tested. So you could say philosophers can get by with a little bit of bull in their life. Different jobs, like a salesman, now they need a little bit of bull too, but they need to produce a product that works. They could say this is the greatest car in the world, might not be true, but the car still has to work. So they have a little bit of bull in their life. Now engineers, in our world, we got to produce a workable product. If somebody says, hey, Bill, I need you to design an air conditioning system for this building, my words can't get out of whether the product works or not. If they're freezing or broiling hot, my words aren't going to do any good. So engineers have to deal in a world with no bull. Now, my position on evolution and atheism, with all due respect, I say evolution and atheism is a world of words and drawings. Those are the drawings that made me believe the theory of evolution was true, but drawings are not scientific evidence. So I respectfully say there's a lot of bull in the belief of evolution and atheism. And again, I say that in fun and kindness. But creation is a world of observation, thermodynamics, genetics, and biochemistry. Science, in my opinion, supports creation without much bull. A powerful reason to believe creation is true is design. As an engineer, I love design. I'm sure Jordan does too. $100 trillion design challenge for Jordan. And again, I say this in fun and friendship. Jordan, if you were funded $100 trillion, you could hire the entire planet Earth. Would you be able to design and build a dog from scratch? I really want you to think about this with an open mind. If you had all the engineers and scientists in the labs, could you build a dog from scratch? Now, often when I teach lessons, I assign different parts of the dog for people to design based on their last name. Now, I understand Jordan's last name begins with a K, and for the K, we have kidneys. So we're going to talk about dog kidneys and whether they're a design or not. What would the design have to do, Jordan, for the dog to live? Well, and could your design team make a kidney? Kidneys do many, many functions. One thing they do is monitor the water content in the blood. You don't want too much, you don't want too little. How it does that is the hypothalamus in the brain measures the water, releases a hormone to the pituitary gland. And the hormone is telling the pituitary gland if it's too high or too low of water. And based on that, the pituitary gland releases a hormone. That's called a feedback control system. Engineers work with them all the time. I don't know of any example of them happening by chance. It takes good design to make feedback control systems. So the hormone goes to the kidney, and let's say there's too much water in the blood. The hormone somehow tells the kidney there's too much water. Let's get rid of some of this water. The water goes to something called a nephron. This is what a nephron looks like. Does it look like design or chance to you? To me, that's a spectacular design. What the nephron does is it filters out the water from the blood and sends it to the bladder. Now, could your team design even one nephron, I politely ask? Well, guess how many nephrons are in one dog kidney? 1 million. 1 million nephrons per kidney. And think, everybody in this discussion has urinated. How often have you seen blood in your urine? You would freak out. This filtration system consistently can take out the water without the blood. That's a design, and that requires a designer. Okay? 1 million miniature filtration systems. Kidneys do more than that. They remove the waste products and recirculate the nutrients. Now, how in the world would the kidney know what is a waste product and a nutrient? That requires design and programming. The kidney releases hormones to regulate our blood pressure. This is incredibly cool. If our blood pressure is too low, a hormone is released and our veins are increased in diameter. If it's too high, it increases the diameter of the veins. A beautiful control system. The kidneys produce electrolytes, and this is necessary for us to have cellular activity. And they don't just produce them, they balance the amount of electrolytes in our body. They produce vitamin D to promote strong, healthy bones. Kidneys also release hormones to control the production of red blood cells. The kidney tells the body, hey, you've got too many red blood cells, or hey, we're too low, make some more. Another control system. And it regulates the pH in the blood. Naturally, because of time, I can't get into much details. But Jordan, just in the kidneys, there's 7 control systems we just talked about, vital to life. And there's actually many, many more, but we don't have the time. Be honest, could you design this with 100 million engineers, a kidney that can perform these functions? I propose you cannot. And once you make the kidney, you've got to get power to it, a nervous system, piping, you got to support it. A lot of things going on in the kidney design. And even if your team could build and design a kidney, kidneys are useless without a circulatory system, a nervous system, a respiratory system, a digestive system. You need all these support mechanisms. Let's talk about engineering in the dog. There's some of the best structural engineering you've ever seen. There's some of the best mechanical engineering you've ever seen. No human could design a system like this. Civil engineering, the waste treatment plant, beautiful design. Look at those teeth. Electrical engineering, dogs are a marvelous design. And chemical engineering, we could go on and on. The dog is engineered. That requires engineering. Oh, and by the way, the design has to start with one fertilized egg. One fertilized egg has all the information in it to make all those engineering systems in the dog. I can understand emotional non-belief in God, but not an intellectual scientific belief. This is a fantastic design, fantastic programming. But atheists think that nature made a kidney. How in the world can nature make a kidney? If 1 million brilliant engineers and scientists can't design and build a kidney, how could nature? Nature has an IQ of 0. People mock intelligent design. Does that mean they believe in unintelligent design? Well, nature has an IQ of 0. It can't make anything. But creationists believe there's a designer with an IQ of infinity. And with no shame, no regret, that's what I believe, that the dog is designed by the master engineer. But God doesn't make things. God makes systems. The dog is a system. The kidney is a system. The nephron is a system. And a system is something composed of many, many components, and they all have to work for the system to work. The nephron is a system. The tissue that makes the nephrons are a system. The cells are a system. The molecules are a system. The atoms are a system. If kidney or dogs evolved, what evolved first? Kidneys, lungs, brains, hearts. If kidneys happened by chance, what part of the kidney happened by chance? What part of the cell happened by chance? Jordan, the entire cell has to work. The atoms have to work. The kidney has to work. As engineers, we know in systems, one component fails, the whole thing fails. It's all got to work. That's engineering. That's design. Nature or evolution cannot make living systems. They can't make a step-by-step process to make these things. Now, Jordan, even if your design team could make a kidney, a liver, a heart, a liver, and brains, the dog is still dead. How do you make it living? A dead dog has a kidney, but it's dead. So, a science question. I know you said you're not a biologist, neither am I, but we can talk things. How do you think life originated? What is your best explanation? Please don't say, I don't know. I'm asking you for your best explanation. Do you think natural materials mixed together, mixed in some energy, and created life? If you do, that's anti-scientific. It violates the the law of biogenesis and the cell theory. It's an anti-scientific belief. If you think dogs could be made from scratch, you need matter and energy. How does matter and energy originate? As a mechanical engineer, I know you know this. The first law of thermodynamics teaches matter and energy is neither created nor destroyed. Where did the matter, where did the energy come from to eventually make the universe and make our dog? And I didn't ask you if you knew the origin of matter and energy. I'm asking for your best explanation. And this is said in fun. After you design a kidney and a whole dog, design an octopus. I propose every living organism on this planet is fantastically designed, fantastically engineered. The most important part of science is observation. What you start with is an idea. Suppose my idea is a pen can fly. What do? I drop it 1,000 times. I observe pens don't fly. Then I reach a conclusion. I propose atheism, agnosticism is an idea with conclusions, but not observational evidence. What do we observe? 8 billion people on Earth, 1 million apes, 0 ape men. This is a huge problem for the atheist side. There should be all kinds of ape men. Why are there billions of people, millions of apes, but 0 ape men? It's not observed. And evolutionists admit, because of time I'm going to rush through this. This is an evolution article. They're still looking for the ape man. I propose they'll never find it because it never existed. And then they say they don't even agree on what it should look like. The key to science is observation. Evolutionists admit there's no ape men. The theory of evolution is thus anti-science. It's philosophy, it's an idea, it's a thought. Where are the transitional forms? Evolutionists will say in the fossils. Let's look at the fossils. Bats show up in the fossil record. Evolutionists say for 52 million years they remain unchanged. Where's the transitional form? Ants show up 99 million years, no transitional forms. Feathers, 150 years, no transitional forms. Snakes, 150 million years, no transitional forms. Leaves, 270 million years. Sorry, I'm going fast. Dragonflies, 300 million years, no changes. Where's the evolutionary evidence? Horseshoe crabs, 450 million years with no change. Where's the evolution? Buckle your seatbelt. Cyanobacteria, 3.5 billion years with no change. Fossils do not show us evolution. There's no evidence. They confirm the creation account. So what do the fossils tell us? Sudden appearance and stasis. These organisms show up suddenly in the fossil record and don't change. They show up fully designed with no change over time. Often they go extinct, but they do not become a new kind of animal. So, my scientific conclusion, if you think dogs are the result of chance and not design, if you think matter and energy can come from nothing by natural means, if you think life can arise from non-life by natural means, and that humans have single-celled ancestors, I politely call that bull doo-doo. So, when you come to a conclusion, are you thinking like a philosopher based on ideas, drawings, and words? Or are you thinking like an engineer, where your conclusion is based on observation and science? Okay? Now, if I got time, I'll keep going. Evolutionists will often say, well, evolution doesn't address the origin of the universe.
I'll give you 20 more seconds. It was up.
Okay, evolutionists.
20 seconds ago, but I'll let you wrap it up.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'll be real quick. Evolutionists often say evolution doesn't address the origins of matter, energy, and life. That's like saying, let's talk about the baseball game, but I only want to talk about the 9th inning. They don't want to talk about the origins because they know they don't have scientific answers for it. And I say creationists love to talk about the whole game, the origin of matter, energy, and life. And thank you for the extra time. And Jordan, please take more if you need it.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for that presentation there, Bill. We really appreciate it. Yeah, you took about 13 minutes, which is fine. Jordan, I'll give you the exact same amount. I'll give you 13 minutes to go over your presentation. Therefore, take your time. And once again, for the audience, good job. Keep tagging Jason with your questions. He is saving them, and we'll make sure we get to those. So the floor is all yours, Jordan.
All right. Let's see if I can get this screen sharing thing going. Share screen 2. All right.
Actually, before yes, we can actually, Jordan. Before we start, I just wanted to ask Praise real quick. It looks like Bill has a slight lag in his video. Is there anything we can do to improve that, whether on Bill's end or your end? Or
No, Bill. I would suggest Bill maybe lower his camera quality down like 720 maybe, and maybe get a mic or get closer to a mic.
Was there any audio issues for you, Jordan? Could you hear everything that Bill was saying? Okay.
It occasionally went a little robot and faded out, but for the most part, I could hear it.
For the most part, okay. Yeah, that's. I just want to make sure we've got the best quality we can. So, I just want to make sure everybody can hear the audio. Okay. So, like I said, Jordan, we'll start the time when you're ready.
All right, hold on. I went to hit it and then it put it on the wrong monitor. Okay. Let me start my own timer. All right, so today, these are the two models that we are comparing. You've got young Earth creationism and the theory of evolution. I should note that while the theory of evolution says nothing about the age of the Earth, it does require billions of years to get to where it is. Models are package deals. If you can show that the Earth is young, evolution as it's currently taught, if you can show the Earth is young, evolution as it's currently taught is dead. But the reverse is true. If you can show that the Earth is old, young Earth creationism is dead. So, given that, let's start with the age of the Earth. How do we know that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old and not 6,000 years old? One method is radiometric dating. In nature, there are some unstable elements which will decay, becoming a new isotope, often by emitting a particle. The original isotope is called the parent, while the new one is called the daughter. The rate at which this happens is described by the half-life. The half-life doesn't change over time, so all we have to do is measure the ratio of parent to daughter, and we can infer how long it has been decaying. There are many different methods of radiometric dating, each with their own assumptions and nuances, but that's the essential principle common to all of them. I don't have time to go over all of the methods, so I'm just going to cover the best one, uranium-lead dating. Zircons are uranium-rich crystals found in igneous rocks, meaning cooled lava. These crystals don't form with much lead, if any lead at all, in them, and once a crystal is formed, the interior is a closed system unless it's damaged in some way which we could detect. Inside these crystals, there are two isotopes of uranium, which decay into two different isotopes of lead, each at a different rate. This means you get two dating methods for the price of one, giving you a nice self-check. If the ages agree, that's very unlikely to have happened randomly. Now, I can already hear you thinking, but how do you know that there wasn't lead in there originally? You weren't there. You didn't see it. What if all that lead was already there? Well, fortunately, there is an isotope of lead, lead-204, that doesn't come from radioactive decay. Since it can't have come from the uranium, it must have been there when the zircon was there already, or when it was formed. By comparing the ratio of lead-204 to the other isotopes of lead, we can infer how much lead was there originally. Because of this, uranium-lead dating is considered one of the most reliable by the scientific community. It's shown some rocks to be millions of years old, clearly far older than that allowed by the young Earth. But how do we know this method is reliable? We obviously can't travel back in time to observe the past event to check, but we can observe things in the present to increase our confidence. Take the Manson meteor crater. This meteor hit the Earth, fusing quartz at the site by its energy, and throwing shocked quartz, that's quartz that's formed by the energy of the impact, throwing that a distance away. That quartz was layered between volcanic ash from eruptions. So testing that quartz and its surrounding sanidine and biotite using multiple dating methods by multiple labs, we can check those ages against each other, and what we see is that all of them agree. They show a perfectly consistent picture with younger rocks on top, leading to the older rocks and the quartz and the shock quartz at the same time, lower down, and then even older rocks further down than that. If radiometric dating didn't work, we wouldn't see this level of agreement. It wouldn't happen. But we see it repeated over and over and over again. If you're not convinced, here's another confirmation the Earth is older than 6,000 years old. 2 billion years ago, the coolest thing ever happened. There was a naturally occurring nuclear reactor at the present-day site of the Oklo mine in Africa. We know this because the uranium there is depleted. That can only happen via fission, and that there are fission products at the mine. You only get these isotopes in significant quantities as a result of fission. It should be noted that even creationists don't doubt that fission happened at Oklo. So in order for fission to work, you need 3% enriched uranium and water. Currently, natural uranium is 0.7% enriched. Uranium becomes less enriched over time, so you can follow that trend backwards. It becomes more enriched in the past. How far in the past? Turns out the math says 2 billion years to get the 3% required for our observations. Now, creationists at the RATE project have attempted to save their model from both the Oklo phenomenon, radiometric dating more broadly, by arguing that half-lives were much shorter in the past. The decay clearly happened faster than it does now, often said to be during the flood, and you weren't there, so how do you know? Well, let's put aside the fact that there's no evidence that half-lives are subject to environmental pressures except for electron capture. If you decrease the half-life, you increase the radioactivity by definition. The formula is there on the screen. Compressing billions of years of decay into less than 1,000 years is a huge problem for several reasons. First, you are radioactive. There's potassium-40 in your food, there's carbon-14 and radon in the air. If we go along and say that the half-lives were much shorter in the past, here's what would have happened to Noah and his crew. From those isotopes alone would be over 132,000 millisieverts every hour. Now, for context, that is more than the dose from 20 nuclear bombs every hour. Now, I'm not a doctor, but I'm confident that that is not survivable. Floodwaters can't help shield from that. One, because the radioisotopes are already in your body, and two, because the floodwaters wouldn't be there either. Snelling, a young Earth creationist with the RATE project, calculated that the heat from the compressed decay timeline would raise the surface temperature of the Earth to 22,000 degrees Celsius, 3 times hotter than the surface of the sun. And he was unable to find answers for this problem, leading others in the creationist community to invoke exotic physics or sustained supernatural processes, i.e. magic, in order for it to work. So, we've clearly established that the Earth is much older than 6,000 years, and therefore the young Earth creationist model is dead. But since I've only used half my time, and I'm still here anyway, I might as well keep going. Again, I'm not a biologist. I much prefer physics, but since evolution is literally in the name of the debate, I guess I have to at least talk about it. So, the theory of evolution. The theory of evolution by natural selection describes how species adapt and change over time in order to fit their environment. The ingredients are pretty simple. You need imperfectly reproducing life, selection pressures, which make some creatures better at producing viable offspring than others, and time. It can very simply be summarized as descent with modification. Children get their genetic material from their parents, but they're slightly different from their parents. Those differences may have no effect, they might be harmful, or sometimes they might be beneficial. Say, a hairier animal was born in a cold environment. Those with beneficial traits will have more success making offspring until eventually an entire population has the beneficial trait. Now, note that this is not a random process. The mutation itself is random, but what mutations are selected is not random. So evolution is not random. The selection pressure determines what is or isn't picked, non-randomly. This process requires no forethought or planning. It simply happens necessarily given the 3 ingredients. Now, that 1-minute summary, of course, misses a ton of nuance. There are other mechanisms for evolution, such as genetic drift. But again, I'm not a biologist. If you want to know more, talk to a biologist. Now, interestingly, Bill and other creationists don't dispute that this happened, what I just described. They'll agree that you can change animals or plants over time, and even point to where we would call them different species. What they will say then is things like, while small changes can accumulate to make a new species, a dog always gives birth to a dog, or something like that. They'll say that everything reproduces after its own kind. But that's kind of a specious argument. These 2 pictures represent groups that even creationists accept are related, but the same argument could apply here. Tomatoes always produce tomatoes, yet somehow tomatoes are related to eggplants through a common ancestor. Cougars only give birth to cougars, but somehow cougars are related to tigers. The answer, of course, is that while every feline born was the same species as its mother, over time they accumulated changes that led to cougars, tigers, and house cats from the common ancestor. Of course, it's even worse if you take the young Earth model, because if you remember, Noah didn't bring every species of animal onto his boat, just every kind. Presumably then, whatever cat was on the ark evolved to every feline we now observe today. Lions, tigers, but not bears. Oh my. Biologists say that level of change takes millions of years, but creationists want it to happen in just a few thousand years. In other words, we're allowed to have a little bit of evolution, just not too much. How much is too much? How fast is too fast? Whatever amount would be convenient, seems to me. What mechanism do they propose to stop these small changes from accumulating into larger changes over time? So far, none. Maybe Bill will change that today. Now, it's been said that there are no transitional forms in the fossil record. There's no crocoducks, as it were. In fact, evolution doesn't work that way. We wouldn't expect to see something that's half bird, half reptile. Instead, what we would expect to see are more ancient ancestors that have shared features of both things. In a sense, every creature ever born is a transitional form from one species to the next. It's impossible to point to a specific spot and say, here, right here is exactly where A became B. It just doesn't work that way. But nevertheless, using the theory of evolution, scientists have been able to make predictions that were subsequently confirmed by later research. That's a great thing for a model to do. Here are some examples. So, Bill mentioned bats. I'm going to talk about bats too. Modern bats are unique among mammals, having both flight and echolocation. For a very long time, every fossil discovered had both of these fully formed features. The prediction of evolutionary theory was that a primitive form of bat should be found, or could be found potentially, that had one of these features but not the other, showing their evolutionary history. This was confirmed in 2003 with the discovery of the Onychon. This primitive bat was capable of clumsy flight and was probably better climber than a flyer, but had little to no echolocation capabilities. Snakes. Modern snakes have some vestigial nubs suggestive of legs, maybe sometime in the past, but they're thought to be related to lizards by a common ancestor. Therefore, the prediction would be that in the past we should have primitive snakes that have fully functional limbs. They haven't lost them yet. Once again, the prediction was confirmed. The discovery of the Najash and several other types of snakes in 2003, which was evidently a good year for paleontology, found a fossil dated to 90 million years ago. It had the same morphology as modern snakes, but had fully functional hips, pelvis, legs, and whatnot outside the ribcage. This upended the marine origins of snake evolution and has tipped the scales towards terrestrial origins. One more. Flounders are flat fish, which have both of their eyes on one side of the head, in addition to being quite delicious. For the record, I didn't take that picture. So they have an asymmetrical skull. It's highly unusual among fish. They got both eyes on one side. So the prediction of evolutionary theory is that there would be more primitive fish found deeper in the fossil record that have skull-eye displacement halfway. Still on the other side, but halfway towards changing. And you know the drill. That was found with this particular fossil. It has eyes on both sides, but it's starting to migrate to the other side. So time and time again, evolutionary theory makes predictions which are confirmed. Each one of these transitional fossils was found in deeper layers than the modern animals, right where they were predicted to be. This kind of success doesn't happen randomly. We should accept evolution because it works. Now, I've barely scratched the surface of the evidence for evolution. Biologists could tell you far more. I won't even attempt to do that. But instead, I'm going to ask some questions for Bill. One, if radiometric dating is nonsense, why do the dates so frequently agree? Two, what specific mechanism do you propose to alter the half-lives of radioisotopes? If you want to reduce the half-lives in order to fit your model, how did ancient humans survive multiple nuclear bombs to the face worth of radiation every hour? How did life and the Earth itself survive temperatures of 22,000 degrees Celsius or higher? Given the rapid evolution required by young Earth creationism, why can't a longer timeline lead to more evolution? What specific mechanism do you propose to draw the line and say evolution can go but no further than here? Why micro and not macro? And finally, how could you distinguish between something that was intelligently designed, some intelligent complexity, and evolved complexity? What markers would you look for? And that completes my presentation.
Awesome. Thanks so much there, Jordan. Actually, thanks to the both of you because both presentations very thorough, very well done. And I know it takes a lot of work putting those together. So thanks again, gentlemen. Now we're going into the rebuttal rounds, though. So since we are now in the response phase of the debate, I'm going to have to be a little bit more strict on timing here. So I've got 8-minute rebuttals, obviously, from the both of you. What I'll do is I'll give you a 1-minute warning when we reach the 7-minute mark, and then that way you'll know to start wrapping things up.
Once again, guys, in the live chat, keep tagging Jason with your questions. And that being said, we'll hand it over to you, Bill. Whenever you're ready, I'll start the clock. 8 minutes.
Okay, and if I need a pause to share the screen, or let me know, okay?
Of course, yeah.
Let you know, okay. Well, good job, Jordan. The title was Creation versus Evolution. I am Young Earth. I believe the Earth is young. You know much more about nuclear power radiation than I do, but I still believe the Earth is young, and one of my primary reasons is erosion. Are you proposing that a fossil could withstand 3.5 billion years of erosion? And I have slides on that we can talk about during the discussion if you want. This planet would be long gone and eroded by now. The sun changes its energy as it converts mass to energy. I'm sure you're familiar with the faint star paradox, where the Earth would have been too cold billions of years ago for life to exist because of the changing of the sun. You might say young Earth creation is dead if the Earth is proven to be old. Well, creation sure isn't, and I'm not conceding that it is, but we're talking about creation. I'll give you trillions of years. I'll give you 100 trillion years. You're not going to get a dog kidney by chance. And in your rebuttal, you can respond to that. The questions of, do you think the kidney of the dog is the result of design? Do you think life came from non-life? And do you think matter and energy appeared from nothing by natural means? Now, to reply to some of yours, I respect that you said you're not a biologist, neither am I. Let me try to do some slides here. Oh, hang on. Let's see. I'm sorry, guys. Oh. Can you see those slides?
Yes, I can see it.
See those slides?
I can at least see it. Can you guys see it?
Yep.
Awesome. And don't worry, I paused the clock while you're doing that. So whenever you're ready, I'll start it.
Sorry about that. Okay, so he talked about natural selection. It's really important to distinguish what we got going on here. You got a furry dog and a hairless dog in Alaska. You accidentally leave them there. They fall in love and get married. They make a mixture, some furry, some hairless. When the winter comes, what happens? The hairless dogs scream, oh my goodness, it's too cold, and they die. The furry dogs, they can reproduce. They mostly make furry dogs. They might have the phenotype for a hairless dog, but the next winter takes care of that. Natural selection rewards traits that are beneficial to the environment. Natural selection does not create new traits, and mutations do not as well. I'd like to talk about mutations. The theory of evolution is a three-legged stool. If one leg doesn't stand, the stool falls. Evolution relies on time, mutations, and chance, and natural selection to turn bacteria into humans, or single-celled organism into humans. Time is not the friend of evolution. Time is the enemy. It's called entropy. As time goes on, systems create disorder. They do not rise in complexity simply due to time. Mutations are not the friend of evolution. Mutations rearrange DNA. DNA makes proteins. If you rearrange the DNA, you're making fewer proteins. You are losing information with mutations. You are losing information with time. Natural selection is not the friend of evolution. With my dog example, you're losing the genetic information for the hairless dog. So time plus mutations plus natural selection are all hurting the hypothesis of bacteria to blue whale. Okay? So there's time, mutation, because of chance, I'll pass on that. So time is a loss of information. Mutations is a loss of information. Natural selection is a loss of information. You can't go from bacteria to blue whale, increasing information by losing information. This Earth is a planet of extinction and death. What do we observe? We observe extinction. We do not observe new kinds of animals appearing. And I'll talk about kinds in a second. So according to the three-legged stool of evolution, thinking nature can make a whale by losing information is like thinking that you can become rich by giving away all your money. The theory of evolution has to account for increasing information. So, a definition of kind. I've talked to geneticists. If an organism can reproduce with another organism in vitro, if necessary, it's the same kind. Let's see my... Okay. Which of these are the same kind? Which of these organisms could reproduce even if it has to be in vitro? Of course, it's A, B, and C. Which one of these is a different kind? These are the Darwin finches. Of course, the flower. The finches could reproduce in vitro. A kitten could reproduce with a tiger in vitro. They are the same kind. Even if it blows your mind of how they all separated, they have the genetic information to reproduce. So, house cats and tigers the same kind? Yes, they could reproduce in vitro. So, they are the same kind. And by definition of kind, or by an evolutionary definition, you could say engineers are a different species than supermodels. Now, some animals will not reproduce with other animals because the way they look, act, or whatever. So you could argue a supermodel is a different species than engineers, but I'm okay with that. I got a fantastic wife. I didn't mean to hit that one. Anyways, sorry about that. Oh, evolutionists. Richard Dawkins will say, we know dinosaurs evolved, but they don't know what they evolved from. This is a quote from an evolutionist. There is no observational evidence of dinosaur ancestors. Everybody knows sharks evolved. What did they evolve from? We know sharks evolved, but we don't know what they evolved from. And you don't have to believe me. Evolutionist articles confirm the same thing. Evolutionists talk about modern dogs evolving from another dog. That's exactly what creationists believe. Now, a very important thing that I wrote down, and I hope I wrote it down accurately, that Jordan said, he says, we would not expect to see transitional fossils. Why in the world would you not expect to see transitional fossils? That's called evidence. It's called observation. 8 billion humans, 1 million apes. There should be plenty of evidence of observation. Are you being driven by the philosophy or by the evidence? I would say you would demand evidence that this happened instead of saying you don't expect to see it. Snakes are round. Male snakes are round. Female snakes are round. Those are not legs. That's so that they can reproduce and start a family, and they have a function. They're not legs. They never were legs. Okay? Hey, you can breed dogs. That's evolution. That's microevolution. Microevolution, getting back to the Jordan's
1 minute, Bill. 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. Getting back to Jordan's question about when micro and macro, what's the difference? It's genetics, it's DNA, it's biochemistry. Dogs make dogs, frogs make frogs, people make people, apes make apes. That's genetics, that's biochemistry. So the difference between microevolution is if they can breed with each other, even if it's in vitro. Microevolution is true. Dogs have a lot of variety. People have variety. But that's not evidence that bacteria is the ancient ancestor of humans. So I wrote a lot of notes. I tried to touch on everything. I guess my time is up, correct?
Yeah, you've got about 15 seconds, Bill.
Let me see what this slide is. Okay, there once was a man who claimed he was dead. The whole world said, you're not dead. He said, I am. Someone said, I can prove you're not dead. He said, do dead people bleed? The man said, no, dead people don't bleed. They pricked his finger, it bled, and he said, I'm wrong. Dead people do bleed. The point is, some people's minds are never going to change. My goal is to present the evidence. Bacteria makes bacteria. Fish make fish. People make people. The fossils support that. The living evidence supports it. Laws of thermodynamics support natural force. But some people have their mind made up. I'm trying to reach those that aren't. And I look forward to the thermodynamics and biogenesis question. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Very thorough and articulate. So just about 10 seconds over. Of course, Jordan, take your time. You get equal time there, about 8 minutes and 10 seconds. And then we will be jumping into the discussion portion. So everyone's looking forward to that one. That's always our favorite part. So Jordan, when you're ready, I will set the clock for just over 8 minutes.
All right, so going through both presentations, could I and a team of infinite engineers, virtually infinite, design and build a dog from scratch, specifically the kidneys? Well, you know, as an engineer, we don't set out to design a kidney. We would set out to design a mechanism by which to filter blood or whatever purpose the kidney had. I think given an infinite number of engineers and infinite funding and all that, yeah, I absolutely could. They have dialysis machines right now. They may not work as well as the kidney, but if I had 1 billion years and all the time and money in the world, I'm sure I could design something to do all the functions. I might do it by taking something that's similar and breeding it into using evolution to create a kidney. And just as a fun fact, I actually have blood in my urine every time, oversharing, but I always think that's funny. I do, actually, every time. So I don't know if I was just designed wrong or whatever. But anyways, so talking about design, evolution, again, and I said this in my presentation, it's not chance. It's selection is not chance. So if you ever hear anyone talk about evolution being random, it has random components, but it is non-randomly selected. It is not a random process. So that's those two. Can evolution create new traits? So yes, evolution usually works by modifying things that exist already, repurposing them. But you can create new information. If you absolutely have to have new information, that can be done, and we've actually observed it being done. So one of the ways it can be done in genes is by duplication and frame shift. You can duplicate a genome or a whole genome or a part of it as a mutation. That's a mutation that can happen as a duplication. The way the DNA works is you've got your triplets of bases. Each letter, each triplet of each letters, they produce a particular amino acid. Taken together, they form a protein. They each one make one and only one amino acid. So you've got this duplicated gene. Then you have a frame shift. One of the bases falls off or is gotten rid of or is, gone because of mutation. Now, from there on, every trio of bases now makes a new amino acid, which makes a new protein, which has a different function. I don't care what definition of new information you want to use, that's got to qualify. So if you want to look for new information in the genome, there it is. And we can see this happening. One famous example is the production of nylonase, bacteria that evolved to digest nylon. Nylon didn't exist until this past century. So, I mean, that's got to be a new trait. I doubt they had it for billions of years, just waiting for nylon to be invented. So that's information. What I did say about transitional fossils, I didn't say that there wouldn't be any. In fact, I showed some. What I meant was you wouldn't see one half and half, like the upper torso of a man and the bottom torso of a great ape, even though we are also apes. But that's what I meant. So you should see fossils with shared features. Now, you can't specifically say this fossil led to this other thing because we have no way of knowing whether the thing that was fossilized even produced offspring, much less the offspring that led to some other fossil. But what we can do is we can show that at that point in time, you had a population with certain traits. Those traits are primordial to both of the later ones, and therefore draw conclusions from that. Erosion. Could a fossil survive 3.5 billion years of erosion? Probably not, but it's a good thing that they're shielded from that erosion by being encapsulated in dirt or sediment, and then everything's stacked on top. It's compressed and turns into stone over time. So it doesn't have to deal with that. So we're good there. So I'm not a biologist, neither are you. So even though cosmology and abiogenesis are not part of evolution, you like to say it's just talking about the last inning of baseball. In fact, it's more like we both agreed to talk about baseball, but then you start talking about field goals. But it's cool because I love physics. So let's talk some physics. Entropy. As I'm sure you're aware, the second law of entropy states that in a closed system, the amount of entropy generally increases. It's a stochastic law. You can have short violations of it, but they're way too short to be useful at all. But you can have natural processes that reduce the entropy in a portion of a system. For example, ice freezing reduces the entropy. We do that all the time. So you can certainly have reductions in entropy. So we could have that on Earth because we have a source of outside energy, The sun. So as long as the whole system, the solar system, has an increase in entropy over time, which it does because the sun is producing far more entropy than we could ever need to create the amount of biomass. Sean Carroll has a good calculation on that. We're good. So the second law, totally good. What about the first law? Creation of matter and energy. So you asked my best explanation for that. Again, not a cosmologist, but so the short answer is we don't know, but there are some good ideas. So it is true that what the first law actually states is that, I actually wrote this down somewhere. The first law states that the net total of energy in a system, in an isolated system, is constant. Energy can be transformed, but it can't be created or destroyed. So as the net total energy in the universe is 0, then it could just come into existence and it would be fine. For a good article on that, you can look at The Beginning of the Universe by Alexander Vilenkin of the infamous BGV theorem that William Lane Craig made famous. While things like planets, stars, and engineers have positive energy, gravity can have negative energy. It's conceivable, and according to many cosmologists, including Aaron Wall, who's a Christian, quite likely, that the total energy of the universe could be 0, and in which case you could have the ultimate free lunch. You could get the whole universe with no conservation of energy problems at all. Anything that's not strictly forbidden in quantum mechanics will happen with some probability. Is that what happened? I don't know, but there you've got a universe without any first law problems. You could also have a universe that just existed into eternity. There are some models that are eternal. For example, the Hawking-Hartle no-boundary proposal. You've got the Aguirre-Grattan model, which has time going in both directions. So you have a region of eternal collapse followed by a region of eternal expansion. The Carroll-Chen model, which also has time going in both directions, spawning baby universes throughout time, that increases the entropy. Are any of those what actually happen? No idea. Nobody knows. Not even the people who made them know. It's cutting edge physics, and we're still working that out. So, but if you want to flatly declare something has to be eternal, no matter what, something has to be eternal, then I would say, okay, cool, I guess energy is eternal. Like, if I have to pick something, at least I know energy exists. So I don't know whether energy came into being the Big Bang because of some zero energy hypothesis being true or not, I don't know. But if it absolutely must have existed into eternity past, whatever definition you want to give to that, then I see no reason why energy could not be a candidate. And all of those models that I described, though they are certainly speculative.
50 seconds, Jordan, 50 seconds.
Okay. Though they're certainly speculative, they don't violate thermodynamics or anything like that. So I agree, supermodels are definitely a different species from engineers. No objection there. Abiogenesis, I don't have time to get into. I'll read that. So yeah, you conceded the old Earth part. That's cool. I'd ask what you talked about microevolution. What specific mechanism would stop changes from accumulating? I understand you say they produce from their kind. That's a lot of monophyly. That's cool. What specific mechanism would stop those small changes from accumulating into large changes? And I think my time's about up, so we'll stop there.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for that rebuttal there, Jordan. We are now going into the discussion portion of the debate. What I'm going to do is set the timer here. And whoever wants to start it, whether you want to start it with a question or just something to lead in with, take it away, guys.
I'm older. I guess I'll go first.
Okay.
I'll give you plenty of time, and I won't interrupt you unless you go 12 minutes, and I don't think you will. So, Jordan, I'm asking for your best explanation, and again, we're just two buddies talking. Is your best explanation a dog kidney is the result of design, and the result, design means planned. Chance means unplanned. I'm not saying random, okay? You said that a few times. But do you think the kidney is the result of design, plan, or chance, unplanned?
I don't think there was an intelligence behind the plan. It evolved over time. So English is kind of fuzzy. So I might casually say it was a design, meaning that it was a design that evolved over time, but there was no intelligence guiding it. No intelligence is necessary.
So you believe in unintelligent design? That was a joke. That's a joke. Is that really being objective or philosophical? To look at a dog kidney, I listed 7 control systems that it can do, You just can't see design in a dog kidney?
Well, those control systems don't have to come all at the same time. They can progressively evolve and get more complex over time, differentiating their functions. So if the model of evolution were this kidney just popped into existence, just with all its pieces, yeah, that would be crazy. But that's not what the theory of evolution is.
But we're talking about a living dog. If it's not making electrolytes, what happens? It dies.
Sure.
It's got to be working from day one. Jordan, I say this in friendship.
You can have primordial beings, primordial creatures, ancestors that were not as efficient at producing electrolytes. They weren't yet dogs. They hadn't evolved all of these systems yet, but over time the systems can become more and more complex. You can see this with the evolution of the eye. I'm not an expert in kidney evolution, so I can't really comment on that specifically. But you can see very complex systems, how they could, as long as each individual step led to some kind of increased function, even if that function is not at all related to its later purpose, then evolution has no problem with it.
But if you were a creationist, that would be a good argument, you'd have to admit. The dog kidney, the dog liver, the dog brain. It sure looks like a design.
Irreducible complexity was my favorite argument when I was a creationist. I am no longer persuaded that there's anything that can be shown to be irreducibly complex. It seems to boil down most of the time to an argument from personal incredulity. I can't see how it could possibly come out, therefore God. But that doesn't follow.
And that's why we're saying we're looking for the best explanation, because I don't know that God exists either. But I look at a dog kidney and I'll say I'm 99.9999% sure that's a beautiful intelligent design with all those control systems where the dog would die if just one of them didn't work. And
But we're not
talking about
sorry.
the lung. Pardon me?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
We're not even talking about the lungs, the brain, the stomach, the liver. This is just the kidney. And again, my hope, I politely say, is that you just consider that there's a designer. And you see, as an engineer, I hope that this makes more sense to you than it would a philosopher.
Well, you have to look at the whole spectrum of time. You can't just look at the system as it exists today and say the whole system as it exists right now couldn't work without a piece. Therefore, every piece came into being exactly as you see it. You can have incremental improvements on the system over time, each of which worked well, but perhaps not as well as the final design, and that's all evolution requires. But I want to talk about, and again, this isn't evolution, has nothing to do with cosmology, but I don't like biology anyway, so I'd much prefer talking about cosmology. How do you, if you think that the universe is young, which I know you've already said you're fine with it, but how do you explain?
No, let me interrupt. I do believe the Earth is young.
Yeah,
but I'm not going to say I know more about radiometric dating than you.
Sure.
Go ahead.
We'll talk about something that neither one of us are an expert in then. So you're aware of the Hubble redshift problem? Galaxies are all moving away from each other. Yeah. So how would you explain the observation that every galaxy we look at, with a few exceptions, Andromeda being one of them, are all moving away from us at ever-expanding speeds? And if you trace that back, it gets to a single point. That's where the Big Bang observation comes from.
Excellent point. Now, you don't have to answer, but how deep of a Christian were you? Were you a Christian when you were a younger creationist?
Yes.
Okay. Were you a devout? Do you read your Bible?
I considered myself devout. I went to church 3 times a week, and I read my Bible, and et cetera, et cetera.
Awesome. And again, my questions are not to set you up by any means. It's just communication. You're probably familiar that 5 different authors of the Bible teach that God stretched the heavens. I believe it's in Psalms, Zechariah, Job, and off the top of my head, I don't remember, but 5 different authors said God stretched the heavens. Are you familiar with those verses?
Mm-hmm.
And if not, again, I'm not here to. So I would say I 1,000,000% agree with you that the universe is expanding. If it were static, I would have an argument to explain that it is young. But I believe it is young and it's expanding. And I'll also defer that you probably know more about astronomy than me. I took 1 semester of it in college. But the Hubble constant is not constant. Would you agree? They're consistently tweaking. And I've heard a few weeks ago they've tweaked it again. And some people are cutting 2 billion years off the age of the universe. Is it true the Hubble constant is not constant and it's adjusting the age of the Earth?
Well, any observation is, of course, subject to revision based on later evidence. I don't think the prediction that the universe is 2 billion years younger has held up to scrutiny yet, but I'd be open to it holding up. We don't know the exact. We're always going to be coming up with better experiments and better observations, and of course, we should update our constants to reflect it. But that doesn't answer the overall problem that the universe appears to be expanding and has been expanding for as long as we can see it. And it seems if God stretched the heavens, and that's how you explain the wavelengths of light changing, one wonders why that wouldn't have affected Andromeda, but okay. It seems a little deceptive if you would make a scenario where I, as a seeker of truth, could look at the heavens and just honestly approach the evidence and come to exactly the wrong conclusion. Like, it seems almost unfair. Like, he's setting me up for failure. I mean, it doesn't seem like that's, I mean, a God like that could exist, but it certainly doesn't seem to be the Christian God.
Well, and I say this politely, we're like two buddies talking over Denny's breakfast or something like that. If your entire faith in God was destroyed because of radiometric dating and the size of the universe, I would have to say something else was influencing your decision. Don't you see the design of your eye, your brain, your nose, your ear, your chin, your teeth, the cell, the universe? There's got to be a fantastic designer. It's like you're straining a gnat and swallowing a camel. See where I'm getting at?
But that's just an argument from personal incredulity. The reason I lost my faith or chose not to have my faith anymore was because I didn't see sufficient evidence to show that a creator was necessary in order to explain any observation that I was aware of. Whether that's the eye, as amazingly complex as it is, there is a perfectly valid explanation for how it could evolve as a stepwise function over time with incremental changes the whole way. And the eye isn't the only thing that can do that. And so if nowhere I look requires a creator, why should I believe one? I should be as parsimonious as I can, right? So if I don't have any observations that require a designer, then there isn't one. Would you agree?
If I agreed with your premise, I would. But would you agree the eye is a system? There's many, many components to an eye.
Sure. That could all have evolved stepwise.
Okay. But let's not just talk about eyes. Let's talk about vision. We'll talk like engineers for a minute. And I'm not the world's greatest engineer. I wouldn't pretend to be. But eyes collect data, then they move data to the optic nerve, and then they interpret data in the brain. So people just might say, hey, look at that spot on that organism. That's the precursor to an eye. Well, if it's got vision, it's got to collect data, move it, and interpret it. And that's an incredibly complex system and I propose systems cannot evolve in living things by a step-by-step process. That doggy would have been dead if it couldn't balance its electrolytes or its blood pressure or the amount of red blood cells. You've got to get it right on the first time. There's no mulligans when it comes to life and death. You're either dead or you're alive.
But there are absolutely mulligans. You have however many members of a population, all of which are mutating and reproducing, and the ones that didn't work die. There's your mulligan. You have a mulligan as a species. The individual guy who messed it up, yeah, he doesn't get a second chance. Sucks to be him. But everybody else gets a second chance. That's the brutal fact of life. In terms of the eye, the mechanisms in the brain, or whatever brain-like analog the creature you're looking at would have, to interpret the data it's getting, evolve at the same time as the eye itself. So, for instance, at the beginning, you have a sheet of photosensitive cells that can detect light, yes or no. It's a Boolean. And then they react to that. It's a great advantage. Some of them have the amazing luck to evolve a slight depression. So now you can tell angles. And some of them, the really clever ones, figure out through evolution, through subsequent generations, the ones that can use that information in order to gain an advantage, they reproduce better. And over time, you got an even deeper hole. And you've seen the models. I don't need to go through each step, but each point comes with an advantage, and therefore selection can work on it.
Okay, but you are, and I don't want to put words in your mouth again, that's not my goal at all, but you are tending to confess that the collection of data, the movement of data, and interpretation of data showed up at once.
The systems can evolve in complexity together over time. You don't come day one with a bundle of optic nerves going to a highly developed brain. You don't need to start there day one. You can start with simpler analogs. The further back you get, the simpler they'll get. And I don't understand what the problem is.
Okay, here's my problem. Vision requires collecting data. Your eye does it.
Okay.
Moving the data, your optic nerve, and interpretation of the data to what it's seeing. Okay? It's a response reflective type system. It's a beautifully designed system. I'm saying if evolution is true, it's a three-legged stool again. If one doesn't work, there's no vision. You can't have I'll just talk about you for a second. You can't have a brain, an eye with no optic nerve and have vision. Systems have to appear all at once, and the cell is a system, and DNA is a system. Jordan, vision starts with the atoms and the molecules and the DNA. We're just looking at the eye, but the whole system has to be there working at once, and that's creation.
So again, you're looking at the system as it exists today and asking how this came from nothing. You have to have every single piece together or none of it works. That's not how evolution works. That's not the prediction of the theory. It's a straw man. What you have is a primordial system, a very simple system, just a sheet of photoreceptors and a response whether you detect light or not. From there, every subsequent advance, whether it's complexity in the interpretation of the data, transmission of the data through the evolution of nerves, through more photocells that are curved a different way, every single piece can be accounted for in a stepwise function. So it takes a phenomenally long time to get to the eye. There are many, many different paths to do it. There are tons of different eye designs, all of which work to varying degrees, but none of them require you to come with optic nerves and brains and lenses and everything else from day one. That no model requires that.
Okay, now both of us could look at human eyes, squid eyes, mosquito eyes, and you could say, hey, these primitive eyes are our ancestor. That's how you would interpret the same data. I would look at the same data and say, no, they're not related at all. And one reason for that would be biochemistry and genetics. We have a human genome. These primitive organisms have their genome. And earlier, you just said you would not expect to see the evidence, you would not expect to see transitional forms. And I would agree with that. And not just on the organism, on the eye. So I'm not running, but perhaps we'll just agree to disagree. I think you have more faith to think the eye happened by chance over time and mutation. And you think I have more faith to think that's an intelligently designed by a god with an IQ of infinity?
Yeah, because you're positing a cause that isn't required.
Okay.
All you need is differential reproduction and selection pressures that enforce that differential reproduction and time. That's all you got. And those are things we all know we have. Therefore, it follows I don't need another leg to my stool.
Okay.
But yeah, we can move on from there. So what if small changes can accumulate over time? What is stopping those changes from continuing to accumulate?
Genetics. Suppose you wanted to make the world's fastest racehorse. You know, this is my opinion. No, horses are breaking their legs like crazy out here in California, and I don't know about nation. I think they are in Kentucky too. You can breed horses to be faster and faster and faster. Is there a limit to how much you could breed a horse for speed?
Sure. Yeah.
Maybe. I believe as they breed horses for speed, they're sacrificing strength and endurance. Okay, a plow horse will never break its leg unless I'm not a horse expert. Suppose it's got a leg with a bone that thick. They're making horses faster and faster. Their bones are breaking. You could breed cows to make more and more and more milk, but there is a limit. I say there is a limit to how fast a horse could run, and you're only going to get a horse. There's a limit to how much milk you can get out of a cow, but it's still going to be a cow. So I would say it's limited by its genetics. And I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think I am.
Well, but we know that genetic information can change and even increase over time. I gave one example of how that could happen. So I'm not saying that the horse could become infinitely fast, because eventually there's going to be a limit to the amount of energy it can intake. Air resistance is going to increase. It's all those cool stuff. So it obviously can't get infinitely fast. But what mechanism would stop the horse from changing, saying the evolutionary model says that cows and hippos turn in cows and hippos and whales share a common ancestor. So what would stop those small changes that would happen on the hippo ancestor to make them better at floating in water, to eventually they start losing their legs, all this? What would stop that change from accumulating? If we can get new information and we have selection pressure, what's stopping it?
Well, like you, I'm not an expert in biology, and I don't think you gave an example. You talked about amino acids and you hinted at ribosomes a little bit, but I didn't really see an example of a change. As to your nylon example, I have a great answer for that. People say, hey, look at this organism can eat nylon, and nylon was invented in 1940 or whatever. So there's evidence of new information. Well, you could say the hamburger was invented in 1850 and people could eat it. I would propose that organism was already able to digest something like nylon, that it didn't receive new information. If you follow what I'm getting at, people invent a new food, we can eat it. It doesn't mean we evolved new information. We were already pre-existing to be able to have that. So I would lovingly challenge, not lovingly, in a straight way, I'm married with 3 kids, challenge you to see what is this new information? What is it producing? If you change the genome of a hippo, you're going to get a mutated hippo. You're not going to get an animal with fluke, blubber, no legs, and fins.
Why not?
Because of genetics. It doesn't have the genetic information to make blubber, fluke, fins.
Right. Let me try to explain the genetic information thing, because it didn't come through the first time. So would you agree that if a gene once did A and wasn't able to do B, and then changes to be able to do B, that would be a new function?
Please give me an example of what you're talking about.
For example, being able to, I'm not versed in the terminology, but it produced one kind of protein, because that's what genes do, and then something changes and it produces a completely different protein with a completely different function.
Okay, I might not be giving you the answer you want, and I might not be saying the answer. Before they did the ENCODE project, and again, I might not be answering, and that's my goal, is not to evade. Everybody thought one gene made one protein. My understanding, I'm fairly confident in this, they did the ENCODE, they tracked the human genome, and they said, my golly, there's 100,000 proteins and 30,000 genes. So that tells us that different genes somehow can code for different proteins. So the genome is not just hardware. There is software involved where different genes can make different proteins. And again, if I'm botching this up, that's not my purpose. So I would not say if it does a different function, it's new information that was able to do that. That would be my best guess, if you understand what I'm trying to get at.
I think I understand. I'm not sure if I'm going to be, like I said, I'm not an expert. I'm not sure if I'm going to have the right words to explain it. I know that you could duplicate a genome. A mutation can happen that shifts the way that the genome works so that it creates a different set of amino acids, which then leads to a different protein. You have a genome that was this big. Now I have a genome that's twice as big. Half of it does the old thing, half of it does a separate thing. If that's not new information, I'm really not sure what could possibly be new information.
Well, I would ask for the information, and my understanding, mutations are 99.9999% harmful or neutral. And I know a lot of people like to roll their eyes. John Sanford teaches that mutations teach that plants have not been around for more than, at the most, 100,000 years. As we observe the mutation rate increasing, that mutations are a death sentence. It's not going to turn bacteria into a whale.
Speaking of running down, do you disagree that the law of... I wasn't completely sure. Do you think the law of entropy prohibits the theory of evolution? Like the two are contradictory?
Very good point. I'm glad you brought that up. I forgot about that. A lot of evolutionists talk about the sun as their system, and they say, or the earth as the system, and say, hey, we've got the sun adding it. So that doesn't violate the second law of thermo. And I would say absolutely, locally, you can violate the second law of thermodynamics, but the entire system cannot violate the second law of thermodynamics. My system is the entire universe. Okay, every atom is the part of my system. So my question is, where did this system get all this available energy? And as we both know, over time, total energy is constant, but available energy decreases over time. And that's what we're talking about. And I'm not utilizing the Earth as my system. That's a straw man, if you want a straw man. I'm using the entire universe, but the entire universe is converting available energy into useless energy over time. And we'd be dead without it.
Right. All right. So you're, of course, correct that the total universe is the largest isolated system possible. So every atom in the universe, or the sum total of entropy in the universe, has increased since the beginning of time or whatever. What that means is that the universe was at a low entropy state at the beginning, at the Big Bang. So the Big Bang, whatever led to that singularity, was a low entropy state, and we've been increasing in entropy the whole way. Now, as to why it was a low entropy state, there's a lot of different explanations, and I can go into some of them if you want, but that doesn't that's just a brute fact. It doesn't interfere with the theory of evolution at all. We've got plenty of entropy to make to have apes reproduce and get better at being apes. So it doesn't seem like an obstacle.
Well, your audio.
I'm sorry.
I can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
It might be my end. I can't hear you. No, I could hear you that time, but you broke up.
Okay. So basically,
now you're frozen.
Standing for truth. Can you see me? Am I good?
Yes, I can see you.
So I'm not freezing or anything?
I can see you now.
Sorry about that. I was just on mute.
Okay.
I can see both of you. So there might have just been a bit of a lagging issue there.
I'll summarize. I'll summarize real quick.
Like it's good now, though.
The universe is at a low entropy state at the beginning. There's plenty of entropy from there to here. So I don't know what the obstacle is.
Oh, it sounds terrible. It might be my end, but
Bill, is there a lag issue for you? Bill, praise. Would it work out well if Bill just maybe dropped out and came back in and refreshed it all, or like what would you recommend?
Yeah, that's probably the best idea. There's a lot of entropy on Bill's end here.
His computer system there is degrading a bit.
Yeah,
it looks like Bill's completely frozen. So if Bill, you can hear us, maybe jump out of the stream,
right,
refresh it, and then come back in, and it should work. Unless he's just really, really shocked. I don't know, but he looks
yeah, he's just like completely frozen.
His mind is blown.
Yeah.
Is he still?
While we're waiting, I don't know if you want to wait for him to come back, but we could try to do some Q&A while we're waiting. I don't know. Up to you guys.
Well, let me see here. I'll pause it. Okay, so my clock says 20 minutes, pretty much right on the dot for discussion left. It looks like we have a ton of questions here on the side, actually. So why don't we? Okay, until he comes back, we'll toss a question at you here. Let's see. This one is from Mitchell. You can take some time to answer this one, Jordan. He asks, knowing that nuclear engineering requires an informative, intelligent engineer, what random process without a foreknowledge and information can construct a nuclear reactor?
Oh boy, I am so excited right now. You have no idea. All right, so nuclear reactors as man-made are extremely complex, mainly because we don't want them to go supercritical and melt down, because we've got fuel that has temperature requirements, because we've got an ultimate heat sink, because we have all these other things, because what we want to do with a nuclear reactor is produce electricity, and that's really, really hard. However, if all you want to do is have any kind of fission reaction whatsoever and create heat, that's relatively easy. All you need is enriched uranium has to be 3% enriched. That's the way the neutronics works out. In the presence of light water, which is just water like you drink, that will be sufficient to moderate the neutrons such that they will be slow enough that when they interact with the U-235 atom, it will cause fission. The fission of the U-235 atom produces 2 more neutrons. They go on to produce fission. If that's all you want, it requires no foreknowledge whatsoever. Put some U-235 in a bucket of water. As long as it's 3% enriched, you're going to get some fission. So, yeah, that's how it could happen.
Well,
Oklo is the coolest thing ever. Just
Can you guys see me now?
yes.
Yes. And Jordan, you answered that question in the perfect time. So no dead air. We got Bill back. And Bill, your video actually looks better than ever. There's no lag. There's no so whatever you did really improved
You lost tons of entropy.
I dyed my beard.
10 years younger. Yeah.
You've added information.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
But I took it from another source.
Oh,
Can I
really?
ask a question relating to what we're talking about, Jordan? Because I think you got a couple in.
yeah, just you said
Okay.
because you didn't hear the entropy thing, just briefly summarizing what I said was the universe appeared to have started in a low entropy condition. What led to that low entropy condition, no one's quite sure of. There's some ideas, but it may just be a brute fact. Because we were at that low entropy condition in the past, we've had plenty of room to grow entropy to now, and so the whole system, none of it's violated the second law, and it's all perfectly sufficient for evolution. That was my answer. Go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. I remember way back in college when I was an atheist, our thermodynamics book was by Sontag and Van Wylen, and they had a commentary where they said that their commentary was that the laws of thermodynamics seem to indicate that there's a creator who holds the fate of the universe in their hands. And that's what I accept. I believe there is a creator who created a universe in a low entropy state. But that leads to a question, Jordan. What is your best explanation of how we got all this available energy? I know you don't know, but what's your best guess?
Well, I think Vilenkin's model of the zero balance energy universe is kind of elegant. So if I had to just like pick one because I like it the most, that's probably what I'd go with. Basically, if gravity in a closed universe in terms of the shape of space-time is negative, and it will necessarily, the negative energy of gravity will necessarily cancel the positive energy of suns, stars, and engineers. So you have a net zero energy. It seems weird, but the whole universe could potentially have no energy on balance, in which case it would not need to come from anywhere because you wouldn't have any. The sum would be zero.
So you're saying available energy came about by natural processes.
Well, I mean total. I was talking about total energy. If you mean available entropy or energy meaning low entropy, is that what you meant?
No, energy that can do work.
Okay, so the total energy in a low entropy state is energy that's useful to do work, right? Yeah. So the total energy is what I had said. Why was it in a low entropy state? No one's quite sure. I really don't know. It could be that there's if the multiverse turns out to be true, it could be a selection effect where you won't get observers if you don't have a low entropy state. Certainly there'd be no one around to comment on it if there wasn't a low entropy state. So
you would be willing to, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, push aside the second law of thermodynamics that's never been falsified for a multiverse that is complete philosophical and only invented because of the complexities of what we see around us. That's why they invented the multiverse. But you'd be willing to push aside the established law of the second law of thermo for the multiverse.
Absolutely not. The quoting, I can't remember the physicist, but he said, if you come up with a model that defies Newton, that's great. If you want to upend Einstein, that's awesome. If your model goes against the law of thermodynamics, I have no hope to offer you. So
I like that guy.
Absolutely not. No. The second law, so far as I can tell, is rock solid, but nothing I've said violates the second law. All the second law says is that entropy increases over time. So if you start at low entropy and then move to high entropy, second law says you're golden. That's all it needs.
Right, but you got to get to available energy to do work. And it can't come from nothing by the second law.
No, the first law says that energy can't come from nowhere, net energy, but you can have a net zero.
Right.
Yeah, if the total balance of energy in the universe is zero, then that's fine. First law is satisfied. If the energy goes from low entropy to high entropy, that's fine. the second law is satisfied. So if you had a net zero entropy universe that started in a low entropy state, boom, both laws of thermodynamics are satisfied. If you had energy that just existed forever, it was just always there, whatever forever means, both laws of thermodynamics are satisfied. None of these cosmological models violate the laws of thermodynamics.
But you would agree, based on what we see, the first law has to encompass available energy. Matter and energy is neither created nor destroyed, but it's not useless energy. It's energy that can do work.
Right. The first law, well, the first law states total energy. That's what it's talking about. The second law is talking about entropy. Yeah, the total energy, whether it's high entropy, low entropy, whatever. That's the first law. Yeah, and then the second law is entropy goes from low to high. That's where work is done. So none of the models I'm talking, all of them are consistent with this.
Okay, but I'm still confused. How did we get available energy? From nothing?
Well, potentially, if the net balance of energy of the universe is zero, then yes, it could have come from nothing. From not the philosopher's nothing, where you've got like basically that from which only God can create. You'd have to have some kind of physical law of some sort. But if something has to be infinite into the past, I'm fine with that being physical law. It doesn't bother me.
But you see, it is a fair point for a creationist to make. You might not agree with it, but it's a pretty good point for us.
I think so. If you're talking old Earth creation, just like where there's a God, the place I would put him is at the beginning of the universe, waving his wand and saying, "Let there be light," and boom, there's a big bang. If you're going to put God anywhere, that's where I'd put him.
Okay. All right. Well, we disagree, but it's a good discussion. I think it's my turn for, well, I don't know if there was a response or whatever, but could I ask you, if you don't mind? I know you're not a biologist, neither am I, but what is your best explanation for the origin of life? And we can keep it real simple. Do you think matter and energy mixed together and created the first life without a supernatural intervention?
Yes.
Why?
So, again, we don't know. It's an open question, and it's possible that it may end up that a supernatural being is required in order to make the first life. Maybe that's where God comes in. It's possible. I can't say it isn't because I don't know. I have seen indications that suggest that there might be natural mechanisms. I'm sure you're aware of the experiments that put elements in conditions that are similar to what we think the initial conditions of the Earth were, and after some time and energy being added, you get biological compounds like amino acids. That's not DNA, but it is what DNA is made out of. So it's at least plausible that since we have the building blocks with enough time, there might be a mechanism that gets you further. What that mechanism is, I don't know.
Okay. And I'm not saying this for one-upmanship. Amino acids make proteins, not DNA. Nucleic acids make proteins.
Sorry.
I mean, DNA. Nucleic acids make DNA. If I could demonstrate, well, do you believe there are statistical impossibilities? You don't have to answer if you don't want.
I mean, technically, if there's any likelihood that it can happen, it's not impossible. But there are certainly things that are so unlikely that you wouldn't expect to see them over the age of the universe. Like, by quantum mechanics, my hand could go through this desk when I put it on it, but it's never going to happen.
Right on. Well, this is all in friendship. I'm enjoying talking to you. Life requires protein. There's 20 amino acids to make to make a protein. It has to be in the right sequence. The average protein is 400 in humans is 400 amino acids long. So the odds of getting that sequence right is 10 to the 520th power. That's not even life. That's only one protein. And statisticians typically say anything above 10 to the 50th is considered mathematically impossible. So Jordan, I respectfully say to you, it's statistically impossible for one protein to happen by chance, much less one cell, and much less one living cell. So you're not even going to get the hardware. But even if you did get the hardware, Jordan, what's the difference between a dead thing and a living thing? You see what I'm saying? My dog here, I love her. When she dies, how is she different than when she's alive?
It would be response to stimuli, electrical impulses in the brain, that sort of thing.
But why is she dead? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
You don't need to go straight from 1 to 400 in order to make life. as long as you have something that can self-replicate, no matter how long that string is, then you've got what you need in order that can self-replicate with a differential pattern. Then you can get the theory of evolution goes from there. I will point out, even though we've gone afield from the subject of the debate anyway, even if you said that God's necessary to create the first life, boom, okay, cool. From then on, the theory of evolution works just fine. The theory of evolution takes life as a given. It doesn't say anything about where that life comes into existence.
And even though I love God, I respect God, I fear God, I might get hit by lightning, so it might not be the internet. God, and I'm glad you're smiling. You're a good guy. I like engineers. I say God himself could not have created through an evolutionary process. Because what did he create first? Lungs, brains, hearts, stomachs. God did not create brains on a Monday, hearts on a Tuesday, lungs on a Thursday. A system in a living organism can happen step by step by step. My beautiful dog's kidney had to be created, just like the Bible teaches, instantly, because it's a part of a system, and it is a system. And again, you're a great guy. You don't have to disagree, but you could maybe just consider that.
Again, if
God couldn't do it, nature couldn't do it. How does nature make a lung? How does nature make a kidney?
With small steps,
the engineers
over
would have a
billions
hard
of
time
years.
making.
Just take small steps.
And I say that's faith, and I think that's philosophical faith, and I respect people who disagree with me.
It seems so. The inputs I see, the observations I see, is that we have creatures that reproduce but not perfectly. That we have mechanisms such as lungs and kidneys that could have plausibly have arisen over time with stepwise increments, and we have billions of years. From that, you get everything else. So I don't think it's faith, or I don't consider it to be faith. I would say that if I said, for instance, that I knew for a fact exactly how abiogenesis happened, it happened this way, and why, because I said so, that would certainly be faith. That's why I don't have that kind of opinion. I don't know what caused abiogenesis. So,
and again, I didn't ask if you knew. I asked for your best explanation. Because I don't know
I just
either.
want to jump in real quick, guys. Everyone's enjoying the conversation. Very, very engaging. Really good, actually. I just wanted to say we've got 10 minutes left on the discussion portion. So proceed, guys.
And then getting to the control. Okay, I'll let you go.
So we've talked about transitional fossils several times. Let's talk about the order of fossils. So in general, if you go from top to bottom, you see more complex organisms further at the top. You see humans and chimpanzees and stuff towards the top. And as you go further down, you see simpler organisms and more primordial organisms. If we were all around at the same time, if we were just, boom, created exactly as we see us today or within the kind, how come we don't see humans in the same fossil layers as much, much older creatures?
I'll say that's a great question. I've asked people, and I saw part of your debate on that, and I'm the type of guy who'll just say, I sure don't know everything either. And I enjoyed hearing arguments against that they lived in different areas. You would say that they lived in different times. Mm-hmm. My best guess is that they lived in different areas. What we do know is that there's a lot of things that are extinct in the fossil record. And earlier you said you don't expect to see transitional forms, and I agree with you that these floods were a killing event of many, many organisms. I would say they're also killing things that are showing up suddenly, well-designed, like your ammonites that you talked about, and then they disappear, that they're not changing into anything. I know you talked about level of complexity, and I enjoyed it. But we can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. We see designed organisms showing up instantly in the fossil record. As to the distribution and the scattering, I haven't seen them. There have not been, as far as I know, dinosaur fossils found with humans. But from my reading of what you guys call the Cambrian layer, that all the phyla are there, including chordates. that there were fish in the Cambrian layer, which is, according to your side, the oldest, and they show up 100% designed as a vertebrate. So the distribution, I'll just say, I don't know. I asked some people about that, and they all said the ammonites were all still ammonites. People haven't observed the entire Earth, so I don't know if I answered your question or not. But
yeah,
I would say in general they lived in different places. That's what I'll say in general. Humans and dinosaurs.
And there may be a human fossil somewhere down there with a dinosaur. We just haven't found it yet. So.
Fred Flintstone, right?
Okay, fair enough. I asked a question. Your turn. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Could anything be so complexly designed that you would say there's got to be a designer?
Probably. It's hard for me to just imagine what that would look like since I haven't seen it yet. But certainly if there was something for which there was no plausible mechanism for it to stepwise evolve, then I imagine that would have to come in situ. Something like that would require a feature that was useless, it required a lot of energy to just be carried through time until it got better later. That would be evidence of planning, if nothing else. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I just, again, I hope you take that to heart, that you're open-minded. I didn't want to become a creationist. I loved my life as an atheist, but I was just so compelled by the truth. It wasn't an emotional thing. I gave up things. You know what I'm saying? And I hope you're not being driven by emotion or peer pressure, or I say this politely, a lot of people are atheists because they're mad at God, they're pissed off because of terrible circumstances, and guess what? I understand it. You know, I've seen it too, and a lot of people have rejected God. But if you just study, this isn't a magic trick. Think of any animal. You don't have to take part. Name any animal on the planet.
Well, can I respond to the why people are atheists thing real quick? As an atheist?
But my point is, study any part of any animal, and really, as an engineer, objectively see if it's a design or not. But go ahead. Yes, you can respond.
So, I was a Christian. I was happily a Christian for all of my life up to that point. It was not an easy or painless process to lose my faith. It was something I was 100% certain of. It was something that was core to my being, and no one likes to be wrong. So yeah, I'm sure your transition was painful, and I believe you when you say that you did it because of the evidence. That's why I did it. I can't speak for every atheist everywhere. I'm sure some of them are atheists because they're angry. Most atheists I speak to are not that way, but that certainly could be selection pressure. I'm not being driven by any kind of emotional desire. If God exists, cool. Like it. I don't have a dog in the fight. If he exists, awesome. Like I just want to know.
What was the main thing that caused you to just toss away your Christian faith?
If you go to my podcast, I've got a whole podcast on it. But the short story is shameless plug. The short story is I was a young Earth creationist, and a coworker gave me a book. I really wish I remembered who the coworker is. I should. He's like responsible for my entire life choices at this point. But the book itself was The Language of God by Francis Collins, and it basically just had a lot of information, answered a lot of questions I'd had, and prosed new ones. So it wasn't a instant thing. Like I eventually was put to the point where I decided that young Earth creation wasn't tenable, so I was old Earth, and then that didn't seem tenable anymore. So I went further back. It was like a fighting retreat, and eventually one day I just realized I don't think a God is necessary for anything, so I guess I'm an atheist now.
That's all. Francis Collins claims to be a Christian, doesn't he?
Oh yeah, the book actually was written for Christians to show them how evolution can mesh with Christianity. Ironically,
just a funny and a polite question. So he made you old Earth, and then you rejected the Bible. I don't want to put words in your mouth, my friend.
Well, he prompted questions that I didn't know before, so it was just a cycle of asking new questions, finding new information, looking up new sources. So basically, it was just the accumulation of evidence and the lack of necessity for a designer that drove me towards old Earth and eventually further. I also looked at philosophical arguments like the problem of evil and stuff like that. I wouldn't say they were as instrumental to me personally as they are to some other people. They didn't help. But, you know.
Wow, that might be the highlight of my debate, that Francis Collins pushed you away from trusting in the Bible.
Yeah, you can write him and tell him he damn my soul to hell. You know.
Well, no, you did. You can't blame him.
he shoved me in that direction. I just kept on.
Right, and you know what I'm saying. But it's an important topic. He probably meant to encourage your faith, and he ended up ruining it. That's very interesting. The main thing that got me out of it was.
Actually, I just wanted to jump in, guys, because we've just got 3 minutes left, and we had some people in the chat just mention the radiometric dating methods and things like that, because it looked like you guys so far have discussed nearly everything that was brought up by both of you in your presentations. There's a couple people in the chat that are just interested in hearing maybe just a few minute response from both of you on like the dating methods pertaining to, for example, Jordan's position and model versus Bill's position and model.
Okay, Jordan knows my arguments better than me, and he knows exactly what I'm going to say. And again, you're a good man. One thing I say, and I've said this before, the only thing I know for certain, the Earth is at least 60 years old. And for Jordan, I think you said you're 33 once or something.
34.
Like that. Yeah, 34. Happy birthday. That's the only thing we know. Everything else we're assuming. So
actually, I think what we'll do, what we'll do is we'll give Bill just maybe 30 seconds here to kind of go over his position, or maybe just refutation of Jordan's stance on his arguments pertaining to radio isotope dating, and then we'll give Jordan some time to quickly respond, and then the last couple minutes you guys can just go back and forth on whatever.
Okay, 30 seconds. Here we go. If I pick up a rock, I don't know. I can determine what its current chemical composition is. I don't know its original composition. I don't know if it's been contaminated. I don't know if daughter, parent elements have been added or subtracted. And I'm not one who hypes up on that the half-life has changed, but I don't know if the half-life has changed. But we don't know if things have been contaminated. From what I've read, over half the dates are rejected because they don't fit the model. From what I've read, the lava dome at Mount St. Helens was dated by 5 different labs, and they were millions of years off. And then people say, well, it was too young to date. And I go, well, when is it young enough to, or old enough to date? So basically, I'm just saying there's many assumptions involved in radiometric dating, and that people can select the dates that they want. And Jordan, you can teach me this. I've read that the same moon rocks were dated off by many, many millions of years. And the lava dome was off. It was only 20 years old, but people were saying it was 230,000 to 2 million years old. So
the moon rocks thing I'm not as familiar with, but I am familiar with the Mount St. Helens lava dome thing. So that's kind of similar to earlier today. I had my scale. I actually had a picture of it, but I won't bother bringing up the slide. I had a scale, and then I threw like a dash of pepper on it, and it said 0 grams both times. The scale's obviously wrong. You know, what's happening is that, of course, the scale isn't sensitive enough to pick up a couple grams of or a couple flakes of pepper. The uranium lead dating or similar long-lived isotope dates aren't sensitive enough to pick up 20 years of decay. And so what's happening is you're getting the statistical noise that you get with any sample. It's just the true decay that has happened is not enough to overcome any kind of noise or contamination you might have. So that's all you have. That's why it's too young. It's just there's not enough decay for the methods we have. If we had perfect methods that could, without any error, detect all of the decay, then we could do it right now. But unfortunately, we don't live in that world.
When is it old enough to date?
I don't know the error on uranium lead dating, but given that the half-lives are 0.7 billion years and 3-ish billion years, I think it was on the slide. I should know that for uranium. Bad engineer. 4.5 billion years for U-238.
5 or 6.
Yeah. So that's a long half-life, so it's not going to decay very quickly. As to a specific number, I don't remember it for uranium lead. For carbon-14, it's 50,000 is the limit, but of course that's a much shorter-lived isotopes, so it can be used in very short dates. It's just the sensitivity of our measurements.
But you would admit, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, that there are assumptions when they radiometrically date a rock.
Yeah, there's assumptions in any model. Doesn't matter what the model is. It's a matter of whether or not those assumptions are valid, and whether or not they're plausible. I think that the assumptions of radiometric dating, the half-life has been constant, is empirically demonstrated at least as many times as we've observed it. Other assumptions include that the crystal has been an isolated system, and you can test that by looking at the crystal and seeing whether it's damaged. So there are assumptions. The assumptions vary wildly by test. It's not a question of whether or not there are assumptions, because if you're going to throw out any model with assumptions, well, that's every model. Like, they're all gone. Every model has assumptions. It's just whether or not those assumptions are plausible.
Well, remember Clint Eastwood, right? Clint Eastwood said a man's got to know his limitations. We got to know what the limitations are. We're not assuming the weight, the temperature, the magnetism, but we are assuming the age when we study a rock.
Well, we're not assuming the age. We're inferring the age based on observations that we make in the present. The same way that you could infer that someone killed someone else by the evidence they left at a crime scene, you can infer the age based on what you observe. Do you know? No, you don't know, but you can have a high degree of confidence.
Exactly. A lot of people are in prison based on assumptions.
Well, yeah, that's why I don't believe in the
I
death penalty.
I know what you mean. I'm not trying to set you up. We're two buddies.
Did that answer the question, SFT, that they had?
Yes, that was very good. That leaves us with really just a few seconds left in the discussion, and we can either go right to the closings now, unless you guys have a couple last things to say. Totally up to you.
No. Are we going to do Q&A after the closings?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So we've got a lot of good questions, a lot of solid questions. Jason, thanks so much. You did a great job. It looked like you've saved every single question, Jason. So phenomenal job. I've got them all saved to the side. So before we get to those, why don't we start with the closings? Bill, since you opened up the debate, we will give the floor to you. You've got 5 minutes.
Okay, can you guys see that?
Not yet.
Not yet, Bill.
Okay. Old Bill on this computer.
No worries.
We didn't have computers when we first started work. When we first got one, everybody waited in line. Good old days. Oh, come on. Yeah, we got nothing else to do, right? Okay, so you guys can't see that.
We're all stuck inside anyways.
Oh, wait, here we go. Okay, I logged off. I think you're going to see it now.
There it goes.
All right. We'll say goodbye to that guy. He's not really dead. That was a good story, at least, right? Okay.
Yes.
Here comes the
And thanks for a good back and forth, guys. That was a lot of fun.
Engineers love to help each other. Wouldn't you agree, Jordan? I love engineering. Okay, real quick, I'll do my life story. Let me get the time right. Okay, I was raised going to church. When I was 14, my biology teacher put this on the wall and said with authority that man is related to apes. I've always loved science, and I believed it. And I said to myself, wait, if we're related to apes, the Bible's wrong. And then I said, hallelujah, I can do whatever I want. For 12 years, I claimed to be an atheist. I truly thought Christians and creationists were morons and a threat to science, and I didn't like them. But when I was 26, a friend gave me a pamphlet that taught me some things. What are these? These are cartoon drawings. This is not scientific evidence. So the schools teach drawings, but they don't teach what the fossils are. Many of the fossils, almost all the fossils here, are bits and pieces of fragments with a lot of interpretation. Nebraska man, Piltdown man, Lucy is an ape that can walk upright. Neanderthal man was taught to me as an ancestor. Well, he has human DNA, but I was never taught the empirical data. I was told the drawings and the conclusions. A polite question of the day: why do the textbooks only have drawings as evidence for evolution instead of photographs? Earlier, Jordan said we don't expect to see them, and I politely say, why not? It should be all over the place. It should be observed for it to be scientific. So, here's a good engineering thing. Everybody move your elbow. It's a hinge. It's a hinge joint. Rotate your shoulder. That's a ball and socket joint. Well, many engineers like to build robotic arms. And robotic arms, guess what they mimic? the human arm. And over here, you can see what they're called: the waist, the shoulder, the elbow, the wrist, the tool. I don't think time, nature, and chance got the arm right the first time. I believe the arm is the result of a wonderful designer, and that requires an IQ of infinity to make something like that. Okay? So, if all high-tech robotic arms simulate the human wrist, elbow, and shoulder, why do people think the human arm is not the result of design as well? Once again, I say that's philosophical and emotional, and I hope people can deal with that. I think that because of creation, we should give thanks. This is not a creation evolution thing, but whenever we get depressed, like with this virus or any problems, everybody has them, take a step back and be thankful. Thankful for your eyes, thankful for your hands, thankful for your feet, thank you for your lungs. That's a key to dealing with grief and depression. Politely, I don't think this was answered. The first law of thermodynamics, I think, is a nightmare for an atheist. Matter and energy does not appear from nothing by natural means. I don't think this was addressed either. The law of biogenesis, life does not come from non-life. We have the law of biogenesis, the cell theory. Life only comes from a living thing. It takes much, much, much more faith to be an atheist than to believe there's a creator. Well, we looked at the fossils. 8 billion people, 1 million apes, no ape men. This should be a problem for an open-minded evolutionist or atheist. The fossils tell us, hey, look at all these smashed things preserved in fossils. They haven't changed. There's been no evolution going on the planet. So, I say this politely. I believe there are 4 reasons people are atheists. I've talked to literally thousands of people on college campuses, etc. I like to talk to them politely. If they say get lost, I get lost. But no one is an atheist because of science, in my opinion. If it was, I'd hear powerful science reasons and I wouldn't be debating. I believe some people are atheists because of suffering. Their parents got divorced, their parents died, they were abused horribly, and they prayed and they prayed and they prayed, and they just became snapped and angry at God, and I understand this. I've had a lot of problems. Everybody has. But that's an emotional belief. Some people don't want to obey rules in a book. None of us do. It's called being human. And so a lot of people push God to the side. Some people do it because of peer pressure. Wow, look at all these smart people who do it. Oh, I might be ridiculed, or I might lose my job, so they just go with the flow like a sheep. And sadly, I think a lot of people are atheists because that's the only thing they've been taught. I would love for schools to teach what the actual fossil record is, what living evidence shows us. Let the schools teach. A lot of people think there's a designer. They don't have to say it was the God of the Bible, but all I was taught my entire school was evolution atheism. And so when I was an atheist, I didn't like the rules, number 2, and I was never taught anything else. I think people should be open-minded and hear both sides. I'm not saying teach the Bible in school, but teach
10
that
seconds,
apes make
Bill, 10
apes.
seconds.
Okay, but if the schools can teach apes make apes, people make people, and dogs make dogs. Okay? So, is your opinion on whether God exists based on ideas, words, and drawings, which is philosophy, or is it based on observation or science? And that's all, folks.
Thank you so much, Bill. We'll hand it over to Jordan. 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
All right. I don't have a slideshow because I was so busy doing the other stuff, but I'll just wing it. So let's just review where we started to where we are. We've got 2 models. We've got the young Earth creationism model, and it says that the Earth is 6,000 years old, that God or some deity made everything in the way you see it right now, and that while things are allowed to evolve, they're not allowed to evolve too much. On the other hand, you've got the model that's supported by all of modern science. The universe is billions of years old. The Earth is also billions of years old. And we can explain all of the complexities in life by stepwise improvements over millions of years through selection pressures. Now, there were questions asked back and forth. I don't want anyone to get the impression that because I couldn't answer a question, there is no answer. And conversely, if Bill couldn't answer a question, that doesn't mean there's no answer. Perhaps there is an answer. So I'd encourage everyone listening to take what you think you heard and check with an expert. Don't take my word for it when I talk about cosmology. Go talk to a cosmologist. Don't take Bill's word for it when he talks about biology. Go talk to a biologist. Talk to the people who spend their whole lives learning and developing these things. It's easy to look at something and say, I don't know, therefore it can't happen. Or to look at a model that you see that a scientist puts forth and say, that looks ridiculous. There's no way a dog kidney could evolve. It just looks silly. The better question, what you should do with that doubt, is say, wow, that model that they're proposing, that looks ridiculous. Why do they believe that? Do they actually believe this ridiculous thing? Or is there maybe, just maybe, something that they know that I don't? And then go find out what that is. If you do that, if you just pursue the truth, maybe you'll change your mind. I think that's the best anyone can do, is just with an open mind, pursue the evidence and follow wherever it leads. If the Bible is literally true, then the evidence will show that. And if the Bible is not literally true, the evidence will show that. So all you can do is follow the evidence exactly where it leads. That's what I did. I used to be a Christian. I believe that Bill is being completely honest when he says he's saying this in love. I don't think he's trying to be mean or condescending in any way. But often when atheists hear things like this, it comes off as condescending, because it's telling us the only reason I could have come to the conclusion that I have is because I'm angry, or I just want to sin, or everyone else is doing it. And I'm sure there are people who have those kind of reasons. But that's not me. That's not many other people, and that's probably not everyone who's listening here. There was no peer pressure for me. I was a Christian in a Christian church. I wasn't angry with anyone. Nothing horrible happened to me at the time that I changed my mind. I'm already doing all of the raping I want to do, all of the zero raping. I am just as moral now as I ever was as a Christian. And I was taught young earth creationism, so it's certainly not that. There's a fifth reason that someone might decide to lack belief in a God, and that's because there's no evidence for a God, or at least no compelling evidence, not enough to overcome the substantial prior. So some things that you might want to look up that show that the Earth is old. The radiation problem, half-lives cannot be compressed. If you shorten the half-life in order to allow for the decay we observe, it makes the radiation go through the roof and would have killed all life and also melted the Earth. So that's definitely not right. The Oklo phenomena requires that the Earth be at least several billion years old. So clearly that's what it is, because that's the observations we have. Bill didn't have an answer for the order of the fossils, which is fine. He's not an expert. You should take that and go find an expert and see why the fossils are in the order that we observe them. Talking about the first law and second law, I thought I answered it. We ended up disagreeing on that. But again, a lack of knowledge is not evidence of a lack. Just because we don't have a comprehensive model for how the universe began doesn't mean that a God did it. But even if a God did, it doesn't stop humans from being apes. So thanks again for having me on. This was awesome. I really enjoyed it. And again, shameless plug, if you enjoyed what you heard here, go to Reason 2'd Out. We release every month on the 15th. And whether you're Christian or not, I think you'll find something there. And I'll just see you the rest of my time.
Thank you. Just in time there, Jordan. Yeah, we all enjoyed it as well. Really, really engaging back and forth. So thanks for making it fun, guys. And of course, we always want you to plug in your channels. So we appreciate that as well. We look like we got a lot of questions here on the side. So I think we're going to, I'm not sure if, generally when you go on, let's say modern day debate, usually it's all questions for the Christian. And usually on this channel, we've got a lot of questions for the atheist or evolutionist. So I hope you're ready there, Jordan. We got a lot for it. But that being said, just so you both are involved, regardless of who's getting the question, we'll allow a quick response from the other, the other debater. If the back and forth goes on for too long, I'll stop you guys mid-sentence just to get through as many questions as possible. Okay, so that being said, first question is from, actually I should ask Jason. Jason, I'm going to start at the top with Honesty Angel. Did you want to take turns asking questions, or what is the easiest way for you?
No, you do.
You want me to just ask them all? Okay.
You got that new headset, man. We got to hear it.
Unfortunately, it's off right now. I had to go make myself. Okay, that's fine, Jason. Okay, we'll start with Honesty Angel. Question is, in what ways could evolution realistically be falsified?
I believe I heard an ironic answer to this of rabbits in the Precambrian. But basically, if you had modern animals or modern appearing animals that appeared before any of their predecessors, then that would violate evolution. Also, if you had features for which there was no possible path to get to them through stepwise evolution, that would probably also falsify the model. I'm sure there are other ways a biologist would know better than I would.
Okay, awesome. Ed, a quick response, Bill, or?
Sure, I think I can falsify it for you. In the Cambrian phyla, there's Cambrian layer. There's 100 phylum. Only 30 phylum exist today. There's more diversity of animals in the supposed ancient rocks, including chordates, including fishes. Fishes show up instantly in the ancient rocks. So you need a bunny in the Cambrian? Well, I can give you a fish in the Cambrian. So come on back, Jordan. Get on the bus. And again, he knows I'm joking. He's a good guy. He was in the Army.
Yeah.
Quick response, Jordan, or do you want me to go to the next one?
Go ahead.
Okay. So next question is for Mosh, or it's from Mosh. Thanks for your question. Let me see. Oh, no, actually, it's from Call Me Emo. His question's for Bill. Okay, here we go, Bill. He says, give your most minimum criteria as to what you would accept as being macro evolution, and explain how it's different from the variation you already accept within kinds.
Okay, I'll do my best. Evolution. Okay, there's 1 billion reptiles, maybe more, 1 billion birds. They have specific genetics. Birds have 80 chromosomes. Reptiles have 20. As you know, reptiles have scales, solid bones, and are cold-blooded. Birds are hollow bone, warm-blooded with feathers. Different eyes. Reptiles have lousy eyes. Birds have great eyes. Different metabolism. If I could see a living or transitional form, I would believe it. But there are many, many fossils. There's trillions of fossils. No transitional form. I just say, people, why is this? They either never got fossilized or they never existed. There's trillions of organisms alive today. We're the living transitions. So if I could see a transition, living or fossilized, between a man and an ape, a bird and a reptile, and I say the genetics are teaching that we won't see it. So I hope I answered Emo's question.
And then he says, and explain how it's different from the variation you already accept within kind. So I think, for example, if you're looking for a transition, a living transition between apes and humans, what would that look like? Like, what would you be looking for anatomically, maybe in morphology, genetically? Like, what would you consider a transition like that?
You know what's funny is, last time I was on, I was asked that, and I said, it's their fantasy, you tell me. I would like to talk. Thank you, Jordan. I'm here all week. Just the waiter on your way out. They got to tell me their fantasy. I can't fill it in for them, but the genetics tell us it's not existing by the genetic identity. Oh, I did say this. If this organism could go out on a date with a human and get her pregnant and then go out on a date with an ape, I would accept that. And I hope I'm keeping it G-rated.
Of course, always G-rated. Do you have a response there, Jordan?
I just wanted to give a call out to Call Me Emo. He gave me some of his slides, so I cheated and used some of his pictures. So I appreciate that. The chromosome thing, there's different variations of chromosomes within the same kind, so I'm not sure that's a meaningful distinction. But really, we're all transitional forms. I'm a transitional form to whatever the next species will be, should we survive that long. So what you're not going to see is something where you like a centaur, where it's half one thing, half another, in that very stark sense. But what you would expect to see, and what we do see, are ancestral forms deeper in the fossil record, because that's older, that have traits that you can trace to things in the future. You can't say that this fossil led to this other thing because the thing's dead, and we can't tell it even had kids, much less whether that kid ended up being a human. But we can at least draw the trend.
And one, it was your question, Bill. So if you wanted, the final few words there, you can take it.
Which fossil is the most compelling evidence, Jordan, that bacteria and whales are related? Can you name one?
I feel like I'm a biology exam. No, I don't know a specific fossil.
Okay.
Sorry, it's not my
My goal
strength.
is not to put you on the spot, but evidence is what we're seeking.
I agree. Yeah, claims should have evidence.
Awesome. Well, once again,
you're not cheating. You're doing research.
Thanks for keeping it respectful, guys. So next question, let me see, going down the list here. Landon Freeman, he asks, what possible findings would you consider to be so indicative of design that you wouldn't or couldn't attribute them to evolution?
I think I basically covered this with Bill, but I can't. It's difficult. It's kind of related to where someone would say, well, what would be evidence for God, and it would be irrefutable, and it's very hard to say like it would be this specific thing, but something it would look like, the character that kind of evidence would have would be a feature, for example, a feature that had no purpose or didn't serve any function. It costs a lot of energy, so would be selected against naturally, but was not selected against and continued to persist until it became some wonderfully awesome feature later. Like something like that would be clear evidence that there's someone with their finger on the scale, at least to me. That's the best answer I've got.
Thank you. Quick response there, Bill.
Well, one thing I like about doing these debates is it forces me to do research, because I'd rather be playing pool, reading about baseball history or something like that. But by reading up on kidneys, I was blown away at how complex the kidneys are. And my favorite thing that I read is they said, we don't even know everything the kidney can do. And 10 years from now, they'll know even more. So as science learns more and more about things like the dog kidney, they learn how much more complex it is. And to me, every day the science confirms there's got to be a designer. My beautiful dog who's laying over there, her kidneys are a miraculous design, and we don't even know everything that her kidneys are doing to keep her alive. And again, you don't get mulligans. If you're dead, you can't mutate and try again. And I know what you said about populations, but I do know she's got 2 kidneys, 2 lungs, and a brain. They're designed, and we don't know hardly anything about their full potential and greatness of design. I got to let her out. I'll be right back. I mean, I can hear you.
Did you have a quick response there, Jordan?
Complexity isn't necessarily a hallmark of design, so you can't say because it's complex it was necessarily designed. That's all.
Okay. Well, thank you, gentlemen. You know what? We'll move on to the next one, though. This question is from Conflict. Questions for Jordan. Does he believe only NFL players can discuss football since they are professionals in that field? Take your time.
I believe that there are many subjects that the NFL player would be best suited to speak on as a professional in the field. So when I say something like, I'm not a biologist, it doesn't mean I'm not allowed to speak about biology. It means it's a very complex, in-depth subject that people literally spend their entire lives learning about. And so I am not qualified. I don't have all of the nuance. I don't understand everything about it. I'm ignorant in that field, where I could speak with a lot more authority and a lot more understanding in my own field of nuclear engineering. So I don't want someone to come away with the impression that because Jordan the atheist didn't have an answer, there must not be an answer. I'm not qualified to speak about biology, but if you want to get someone who is, please go talk to a biologist. But if you want to learn about a nuclear reactor, totally talk to me.
Awesome. Quick response, Bill, or you want me to go on to the next question?
Oh, no, I love the question. As a former nose tackle in the NFL, I would say yes, only we can talk about football. Now, look at these wrists. I didn't say in the NFL. But, I was doing a Bible study, and I was going to talk about homology, about how evolutionists say, hey, look at humans have 5 digits on their hand, birds do, and whales do. And my daughter was 7, who's never taken biology, and she goes, what are you doing, Daddy? And I said, oh, I'm teaching how they are similar but different. And she goes, but Daddy, don't they all have different DNA? I mean, Shakespeare said a cat can learn from a king can learn from a cat. And my grandpa used to say, everyone can learn something from everyone. So we should never be, and I'm not saying overly humble or overly arrogant, My daughter had leukemia. I did a lot of research, and this is medical advice for the whole world listening. Your doctor wants you to get better, but you can learn much, much more about your individual case than your doctor can. Again, doctors are wonderful. They mean well, but do research. You can learn a lot on specific things like that. And we're not biologists, but we can look into biology. And if we make mistakes, hopefully we learn and move on. But again, my daughter taught me about homology, and we can learn by being open-minded and humble.
Well, I really appreciate that response, Bill. Did you have something you wanted to say, Jordan, or?
I agree. You should do your own research. You shouldn't assume that you know more than an expert without at least looking into what the expert actually says.
Okay, awesome. Well, next question is from Conflict. Question is for Jordan. He says, please elaborate on natural selection not being a chance, or explain what it is then.
Okay. So by chance, by random, what I mean is that there's no guiding process. It will pick it'll pick randomly from the selection. So if you roll dice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you'd get an equal number of all of them. By it not being random, what I mean is, though what it's given is random in terms of like mutation and stuff, what it selects is the trait that leads to the most viable offspring that then propagate the gene. That's not random, because it's not random. If it were random, then when you had those dogs in the cold that Bill brought up, and eventually you get all hairy dogs because they're better suited. If it were random, you'd have half dogs without hair and half dogs with hair, and that's just the way it would go forever, and then all the hairless dogs would keep dying over and over and over again. That's not the way it is. What you have is a non-random selection of the better dogs until of the randomly generated trait. You have a non-random selection. So it has random components. It is not randomly selected. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it does, Jordan. Thanks so much. Quick response there, Bill?
I like Jordan so much as a buddy, an engineer, and a patriot. I hate to do it, but would you agree that natural selection doesn't add information to a population? It removes information from a population, like the information to make a hairless dog.
No, I wouldn't agree. I talked
Natural
about
selection adds information.
It can. I talked about how I mentioned how genomes could add information if it were necessary to add information. So I won't categorically say that.
But natural selection doesn't add information. Mutations might be able to.
Okay.
But natural selection just says exit stage right to you hairless dogs. It doesn't add information.
I see what you're saying. Natural selection kills off the ones that aren't suited. That's what it does.
We're just two pilgrims seeking knowledge, right? So natural selection doesn't add any information to a population. It wipes out information.
There's a question here involving gene duplication, so maybe both of you can answer this. Jordan mentioned that gene duplication is a mechanism or a type of mutation that may be able to add the new novel information to the genome. How would you address that, Bill? And then we can also have Jordan respond to that.
Let's see. So I gotta. Oh, my computer's doing weird stuff. I got to try to look intelligent about something I don't know that much about. Okay, so I'll tell you what I do know, and it's not much. I took a college biology class. Genes make protein. Genes can get mutated, and my understanding is they do not add proteins to the genome. If you mutate a gene, you no longer make as many proteins as you used to. And I know the types of mutations. They can be duplicated, transferred, eliminated, things like that. So I'm doing a lot of talking by saying my understanding is mutations is a horrible explanation to change information from a single cell organism into a well. John Sanford told me years ago, mutations could potentially, and he doesn't believe it, turn a whale into bacteria, but it's not going to turn bacteria into a whale. It could eliminate traits and functions, but it's not going to add information to the genome. And I did my best.
Thanks, Bill. And how would you respond there, Jordan?
So the question was, could you say the question again real quick?
Well, it just involves, since you guys were talking about mutations and what can add information to the genome, it just had to do with gene duplication, which was a type of mutation that you mentioned in the debate that could add the information to the genome. Bill gave his, I guess, rebuttal or response to that, and then I'm just giving you a chance to respond to what Bill said.
It seems to me that if you have a gene that is making protein A, it duplicates, and then through frameshift or some other mechanism, you have the original gene that was not that was duplicated. It still makes A, and then the duplicated gene, which then changes, it makes protein B. Now you have another protein that you didn't have before. If that doesn't qualify as new information, I don't know what would. But again, I defer to the expertise of biologists.
Okay, I appreciate that. Let's move on to this question from Mosh. Mosh MYY, thanks in the chat for the question. His question's for Jordan. He says, since stasis disrupts gradualism, which led Stephen Gould to develop the punctuated equilibrium hypothesis that didn't hold up, what is your answer for how life formed change over time? I just read that word for word.
I think I see what he's saying. Obviously, the level of understanding I have for biology doesn't do much more than scratch the surface, because again, that's not my field of study. So if you wanted to get very specific answers for why we went with punctuated equilibrium over another model, he'd have to go speak to an expert. That's beyond my grasp of the subject. What I will say is that from a very generic kind of crayon level understanding of evolution, changes accumulate over time. Now there's confusion. I won't say confusion. There's, of course, it's an active area of research. It's unclear whether that rate goes more gradually, like a straight line, or if it's kind of steps, or I'm not sure what the current status of the science is there. But it doesn't really matter whether it's stutter stepped or it's a gradual slope. Either way, you can still get the same results.
Okay, awesome. Did you have a response to that at all, Bill?
Sure. A great question. And again, I always ask it with respect. If someone says they believe in the theory of evolution, I never diss people's beliefs. I say, which one? Is it gradualism, like Darwin taught? Is it punctuated equilibrium, where Gould admitted, he was the Harvard expert on fossils, that the Cambrian explosion was a nightmare, that there's no transitional forms. So Gould taught that changes happen so fast, we don't have fossils. That's punctuated equilibrium. And the third theory of evolution is theistic evolution, that God caused it. So Christians out there can ask evolutionists, well, which theory do you believe in? Because they disagree among themselves. They believe it, but they still disagree among themselves. And Gould was honest enough to admit there's no fossil evidence for his theory or living evidence.
Thanks for that, Bill. One last response there, Jordan, or move on to the next?
You can have models that adjust over time, so the overall conclusion can stay the same, but the specific mechanisms can change. That's just the scientific process.
Okay, I appreciate it, guys. You're making the Q&A lots of fun. Everyone's enjoying, so thanks for that. This question, good question from Audra. I hope I said that right. Questions for Jordan. Concerning duplication mutations, are you familiar with the C-value paradox? Why would less complex organisms have genomes much larger than more complex ones? Take your time.
So, to the best of my understanding, the size of a genome is not necessarily indicative of the complexity of the creature, the thing it does. I would imagine, just from and I'm speaking kind of guessing here, I would imagine from a just information theory kind of standpoint, there would be a minimum threshold for a certain level of complexity in terms of size. But because you can have genome duplications that don't necessarily lead to any new features, that I don't think you could draw a one-to-one correlation with genome size and complexity. As to the exact paradox, I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for that, Jordan. This question, another question for
Did you want to give Bill time for that one?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Did you want to respond to that, Bill?
Well, I'd like to say that guy's got the same roof that I got to my right. But anyways, I would say the genetic complexity of a whale would be more in depth than the genetic complexity of a bacterium, but the length could be different because I've heard the length of genomes can different, but I would say the number of genes different. I'm a biologist, and I'm glad Audra is.
Awesome. Thank you for that response there. Bill, did you have something to say to that, Jordan? Okay, perfect. Question for Jordan. Can fossils be considered evidence for creationism?
So there's a common trope where you say like evidence is agnostic. It doesn't. You can't have evidence. We all have the same evidence. We're just putting our interpretation on it. I think this is just a failing of the English language. When I say that something is evidence for X or evidence as opposed to evidence for Y, what I mean is the observations more readily support one model versus another. If you're willing to make assumptions and you're willing to make ad hoc changes to your model, you can fit any observation into any model. Doesn't matter what it is. You can fit anything you want, but that makes your model less likely. So when I say that fossils are evidence for evolution, for example, what I mean is they're more readily explained by the evolution model as opposed to some other more complex model.
Thanks for that. Bill, did you have a response?
Sure. We talked about police. Police can never absolutely prove a murder. If someone came running out of a murder scene with a knife in their hand and blood on them, they could say, hey, I took the knife out of the guy. But you build up a best case explanation for it. If you're waiting for 100% absolute, you'll never get it. And you'll never get a conviction in court if that's what you need. You're looking for the preponderance of the evidence. And if there's trillions of fossils and none of them are transitional, and many of them are identical to what we have today, I would say any jury would say most likely there are no transitional forms. So I would say, yes, it is powerful evidence, but not absolute proof for creation, but overwhelmingly powerful evidence that would lead to a conviction in a court of law.
Up to the point where he said trillions of fossils, I agreed with every single word he said. Up to that point. So that's it. That's all.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Jason, some of the people in the chat they're telling you to stay still. You're making them dizzy.
I don't like it.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Attaboy.
All right.
I was gonna fire you from being co-mod, but you did such a good job with the questions to the side. So, all right, beautiful. Let's go. Oh, I think I lost my spot here.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Well, since most of the questions here for Jordan, I'll throw this one at Bill. Since you guys were talking about transitionals earlier, and it's always on people's minds, how would you respond to evolutionists that use Tiktaalik, right, the so-called fishapod, as proof for the perfect transition between fish and land animal?
Can I show some slides on that? I got it. First, in poker, you might say, what are you going to put your hand on? You're going to really bet on that hand. Let's suppose this is a poker. Are you going to bet on it? The headlines of the National Geographic: fish with first neck evolved slowly into a land animal. The first question you should ask is, what did they find? No matter what you believe in creation evolution, try to find out what the actual fossil looks like, the details on it. Don't believe words and stories all the time. Take a look at the fossil. You've got eyes. So here's the quote: careful analysis of the skull indicates it was an intermediate step between fish and land animals with physical features. The skull. How do you tell a skull tells you if it can walk on the land and swim? So what body part would be strong evidence that fish evolved into land animals? The skull, legs, or belly button? That's it. If that's my poker hand, I'm not making much of a bet on that, but people take that fossil, proclaim it. Almost every evolutionist that I hear talks about Tiktaalik, and all they're talking about is the skull indicates that it was an intermediate. To quote Tom Hanks in the movie Big, I don't get it. It looks like a beat-up old fossil to me. And is that what's the best you got? Looks like a beat up old jalopy. Not a good fossil. Hardly compelling evidence.
Thanks for that response, Bill. Of course, Jordan, you get the chance to respond if you'd like to.
I'd echo what Bill said, that you shouldn't take the headline of National Geographic or any other popular reporting platform. You should always go back to the actual research and ensure that what's being reported is actually what they found. Personally, with Tiktaalik, I think that the most impressive part about it is that it was a prediction. They thought that if their conception of how evolution worked was true, that we should find a fossil that had these kind of features, and we would find it in this layer, in this area, and then they dug there and then found it. That to me is much more impressive than the size of the fossil or anything else. It's a confirmed prediction.
What in that fossil tells you it's an evolutionary transition?
You'd have to read the research to know the exact morphology.
And I ask that with respect.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's go. We got
the best fossil too.
Once again, you guys are making this fun. This has been a blast. Really, really, really good debate. Really, really good discussion. So a couple more questions here. I have one from George Bond. Okay, George, thanks for your question. Lots of good questions tonight. So thanks, guys. He says, this question's for Jordan. The Ashley phosphate beds show numerous fossils in a 15-inch layer. Those fossils represent hundreds of millions of years of geology. How does that time relate to 15 inches? Take your time.
It's a common misconception that every layer of rock requires millions of years to assemble. No geologist says that. Different types of rocks accumulate at different rates. Sometimes it's very gradual over time. Sometimes it's very rapid. You can have mudslides that eventually come into a layer of rock, and they, of course, can happen very quickly. So the length of time it would take for that specific rock to accumulate would be specific not only to the type of rock it is, but its local geology. So don't simply assume because it's 15 inches, it can't possibly have been millions of years, or because it's a foot thick, it must have been. Like, that's not. There's not a one-to-one there. You have to do more work.
And you can respond to that, Bill, of course.
I'd like to talk about geologic layers. Oops, wrong one. And strata, I think, is another nightmare for the old Earth atheists. How in the world does strata bend like that? Now, according to evolutionists, these layers are millions of years different, but they bend at 90-degree angles like that. Rock doesn't bend. But I used to work construction, and that's the Grand Canyon right there. How does it bend? Does concrete bend? Yes, when it's soft. I used to install curbs when I was in college for a living. I loved it. But anyways, concrete can bend, but only when it's soft. Rock cannot bend after it's hardened. So whenever you're driving on the freeway, if you look at a road cut, you're probably going to see bent strata, which had to have happened, in my opinion, and from what I've read, when the rock was pliable, not when it was hard and solid.
Any material can bend with heat and time. Heat can overcome those obstacles with sufficient time, short bending. Heat can relieve stress, et cetera, et cetera.
So the heat heated all those layers and then bent it?
With heat, you can anneal. It's not a short process. You certainly couldn't get rock, boom, like one day it's 90 degrees. That's not going to happen. But of course, nobody thinks that's what happened.
But they laid over millions of years, and they got hot, and then they bent like that. In your opinion?
Sufficient time with pressure and heat. But again, talk to a geologist.
Okay, and we politely disagree.
Awesome. Okay, well, this next question is from Science is Observable. Thanks for your question. Question is for Jordan. Do you think directed panspermia is a possible explanation for the origin of life?
And if I recall correctly, that is life coming from outside the Earth, like a meteor with life on it crashing on Earth. Is that right? Someone check me. I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
I believe, yeah.
Yeah. I guess. I mean, I don't know. I haven't really seen much. I haven't seen an in-depth analysis of that. It seems to me that would only just kick the can down if you're really worried about the origins of life. That would talk about the origins of life on Earth, but then, of course, where did that life come from? So it just moves the question down one more notch. If that's the way it happened, great. Maybe there were other conditions wherever it came from that are way more easy to understand. I don't know. So I guess the answer would be yes. I guess it's possible, but I'm not aware of evidence for it.
Thanks for that response there, Jordan. Bill, did you have something to say?
Well, of course I wasn't there, but I don't believe life originated from outer space. But even if it had, I would believe that bacteria would only make bacteria. It's not going to mutate into whales, humans, and redwood trees. That's genetics, and that's biochemistry. But the evolutionist not only has to create matter, energy, and life, it has to create an organism that can mutate, survive, and make all that we see today with different respiratory systems, digestive, immune, circulatory. They've got about 100,000 Grand Canyons to jump across, and they've got the jumping power of a flea. And I'm not putting them down, but they have so many hurdles to cross. And I think an open-minded person would reject bacteria to blue whale evolution.
Okay, since it was your question, Jordan, did you have a few final words? Okay, I respect that. Well, I want to respect the debaters' time, so we've just got one last question we can get to. Once again, thanks for all the great questions from the audience. There might have been a few we missed, but we've been going at it for a while. So thanks for your time to obviously Bill and Jordan. We really appreciate it. So this question for Jordan, I'll read it word for word. If dinosaurs died out millions of years ago, why do we find dinosaur fossils with collagen and blood vessels with red blood cells and flexible tissue? Take your time, Jordan.
So that's referring to the findings of Dr. Schweitzer, I believe her name was, who is actually a Christian. There's a lot of misconceptions as to what exactly she found. It's not like she found a hunk of flesh like you take out of your arm. It required treatment in order to become pliable. You had to rinse the minerals off. But it was astounding. Nobody thought at the time, they weren't aware of a mechanism by which things could be preserved in that great quality over such a length of time. Her research showed that given the right conditions, and her research shows some of those conditions could be, that it turns out in the isolated conditions inside the bone, if it's buried just right, that it can be remarkably well preserved to the point where you have these traces of red blood cells, not actual red blood cells, but traces of them. So I think that it should be compelling to anyone that the person who made that discovery is actually quite irritated with young Earth creationists when they, in her words, misuse her research and mischaracterize it to say that it shows that the Earth is young. So I would defer to the person who made that discovery, Dr. Schweitzer, and tell you to look at her explanation. Okay,
and did you have a response there, Bill?
Oh, yes, I do. We got to learn to separate data from interpretation of data. The data was in 2005, I believe it was in Montana. She cut a leg of a T-Rex, and it had soft tissue and collagen in it. She came out and said, "Hey guys, I found soft tissue in a dinosaur fossil." That poor lady was put through the grinder. They criticized her research, her methods, etc. For about 8 years, they denied it was possible for soft tissue to be found in a dinosaur fossil, and she went through the ringer. During that 8-year period, I made a phone call to the Museum of the Mountains in Montana, and they were researching it. And I talked to a very nice young man. I didn't tell him I was a creationist, but I asked him a question. I said, "Are you researching whether it's soft tissue or not?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Couldn't a police laboratory tell you in about a half hour if it is or not?" And he laughed and he says, "Well, we can't be too rash." That's his exact quote. "We can't be too rash." Well, data is never rash. Interpretation of data is rash. After many years, more and more and more, several soft tissue, people can Google soft tissue in dinosaurs and fossils, is being found. And eventually the evolution world said, hey, somehow it can last in a fossil for 68 million years. That's why I came up with that "I'm dead" cartoon, where that guy said, I guess dead people do bleed. For 8 years, evolutionists resisted soft tissue in an old fossil. When they said, we've got to concede there's soft tissue in fossils, they say somehow, their exact quote is, it can be amazingly preserved. And so the data is Mary Schweitzer found soft tissue. The creationists like me say, hey, the Earth isn't that old. old Earth people can say, hey, it's amazingly preserved. Neither one can be proven, but neither one should be mocked or ridiculed, because I believe the better explanation is it's recent instead of old. But name calling never produces anything.
If you just take the interpretations of that, what happened is someone found something that was contrary to what was thought before. And so, of course, it was rigorously checked. It was checked over and over and over again. People checked her methods. People checked her findings. They ran her through the ringer. That's science. That's the way it works. Eventually, after doing all those checks, they found out, well, looks like we were wrong. And so they changed their mind. That's why the scientific method works. And that's why being open to new evidence is a beautiful thing. That's exactly what happened.
But it was 8 years of researching the data, not the interpretation.
Yeah,
the data should take that long, and now it does. They do it all the time.
You can't do it overnight. It takes time.
No, 8 years is a long time.
Yeah, that was
they
fast.
did fight it.
That's fast on the scale of scientific discoveries.
Okay, guys, once again, thanks for keeping it respectful and fun. That would conclude the question and answer. Like I said, thanks so much for making this debate as much fun as it was. Everybody in the live chat had a great time. So, yeah, thanks again, guys. I'll hand it over to you guys just for the last words if you want to like plug in your channels or just, say something before we end the stream. Go ahead. We can start with you, Bill, if you'd like.
Okay. Jordan, thank you for serving in the Army. You're a fine man, fine patriot, and a good student, intellectual man. I enjoyed the talk, and my goal is simply to produce evidence that I think is evidence, and people can do whatever they want. I don't respect them any more or less. So I just hope that as an engineer, you'll see the beauty of the dog kidney. You'll never look at a dog the same again and realize there's got to be a God. I don't believe the Earth is trillions of years old, but even if it is, the dog kidney is a design, and I hope you find your way back to that. But you're a fine young man no matter what you believe, and I respect you greatly.
Well,
yeah, go ahead, Jordan.
Thanks for that. Again, I enjoyed this a lot. It was great talking to another engineer. As an engineer, I'm more of a cat guy, so I'd probably be more impressed with the design of the cat. But if people... cats are just so much better. They take it. They don't care about you. They have no desire to be around you. It's the perfect animal. But yeah, if anybody's more interested in like examining evidence, ways to process doubts, whether you're Christian or you're atheist or somewhere in between, it doesn't matter. We all have doubts. We all have to answer these same questions, and I think that's why we've all got reason to doubt.
I like that play on words. That's Jordan's podcast.
Yeah, it is.
And out evolution.
If you like what Bill had to say, or if you like what Jordan had to say, please check out their channels. Check out Jordan on Facebook and on his podcast site as well. So thanks so much, guys. I know it went for a couple hours there, but the debate was a blast. So it flew by. So I want to thank you guys again for giving us your time for this.
I apologize for all the distractions.
Thank you very much.
That's good. It's good. Thanks for having me, man. It's great.
Thank you, Jason. Don't worry, brother. So I'll hand it to Praise. I want to thank Praise for, he's the behind the scenes guy. He's the one that makes this happen. Without Praise, we wouldn't have these debates either. So thanks for sorting out any technical difficulties at any time, Praise. So I'll hand it over to him to shut it down.
You're welcome, SFT.
Hey, everybody.
He's been waiting 2.5 hours to use that.
You're worth the wait.
He's thinking, all right, my moment shine.
All right, guys. Thanks for in the chat. Everyone got involved tonight, and we're going to say goodbye and God bless.
God bless.